Chapter 3042, 3042 6th Tier. Chapter 3042, 3042 6th Tier. 3042 6th Tier. Ling Han's mind was clear, and the powers of dimension boiled, suppressing the 4 fundamental powers in his body. This was a great thing. There was no difference between the 6 types of fundamental particles. Starting from the 1st tier, as long as one mastered one type of fundamental particle, they would be able to advance to the next tier. In theory, if one could grasp 6 fundamental particles at the peak stage of the 1st tier at the same time, no matter how weak their power was, they would still be an ultimate elite of the 7th tier, and their physique would be indestructible. However, no one could do that. It was very simple. Particles of different type repelled each other, and one could only master one at a time. Furthermore, as the number of fundamental particles in Ling Han's body increased, it would naturally become more and more difficult to sense new fundamental particles. However, Ling Han was now using the powers of dimension to suppress the 4 fundamental particles, making him feel as if he had returned to the 1st tier. The fundamental particles in his body no longer acted as a hindrance to hold him back. This allowed Ling Han to see hope of a breakthrough. However, these were just mere words, and it wasn't an easy task to truly sense the 5th fundamental particle. Time passed quietly like a shuttle. 100,000 years, 1 million years, 10 million years. Ling Han had completely lost track of time. He spread out his divine sense and interweaved it into a net, sensing the 5th fundamental particle. It had appeared. A hint of joy suddenly appeared on Ling Han's face. He had discovered a brand new fundamental particle that was emitting a dazzling light. Strangely, he hadn't noticed it before. Even though he had already used the powers of dimension to suppress the fundamental power in his body, it was still insufficient, and the fundamental power was still affecting him. Otherwise, he should have succeeded long ago. However, it did not matter. The most important thing was the result. He had succeeded. He communicated with these particles, and absorbed them into his body to temper himself. Boom! His entire body shook. This step represented that he had advanced into the 6th tier. From the looks of it, his power didn't change at all, but he had now mastered 5 fundamental particles. Under the tempering of these 5 fundamental particles, his body could accommodate more power, and his physique would become stronger. On another aspect, he could also accommodate more dimensions and raise his dimensions to a new level. He wasn't in a hurry to come out of seclusion. Right now, he had only stepped into the 6th tier in name, and his power hadn't increased exponentially. The heavenly venerable seals in his body began to glow as they frantically absorbed the fundamental power. Another 3 billion years passed, and Ling Han finally stopped. The upper limit of dimensions in his body had already been lifted, and he could cultivate them to high-tier high-level dimensions now. However, how many years would it take for hundreds of thousands of dimensions to all be cultivated to become high-tier high-level dimensions? Hundreds of epochs. Ling Han shook his head. Without a special opportunity, this would be an impossible mission. Unfortunately, the Genesis world of the last era had already been completely destroyed, and there was no more energy for him to absorb. This path would not work. He had to think of another way. Actually, it was also very simple. As long as life and all things truly evolved in the dimensions in his body, would Ling Han still need to cultivate? The dimensions could grow endlessly and independently. Ling Han's current dimensions indeed already had life, but it was only the lowest level of plants, and was far from being true dimensions. He needed more parts of the secret code of life. Ling Han sighed. This was a little difficult. Who knew who else in the world had that kind of light spot hidden in their minds? Hang on. He had already advanced into the 6th tier, and although his powers of dimension hadn't increased by much, he had still grasped an additional fundamental power, and his abilities had increased by at least tenfold compared to before. In other words, he could now confidently say that his battle prowess was number 1 in the world. Of course, that was excluding hysteria. Then, how many resources could he obtain? Of course, these resources weren't referring to a treasure that could increase his cultivation speed. This basically didn't exist. However, he could create something similar to Wall-E. What did Wall-E say? An analytical war soldier? Forget it. This war soldier would only have one function, and that was to explore a person's mind to see if there was that light spot. If he placed a few in each dimension and they kept searching, how many times would his efficiency increase? Yes, that was a good idea. However, he had to find Wally first. Originally, Ling Han had wanted to look for Chong Yang and the others as soon as he came out of seclusion, but after thinking about it, it was better to increase his own strength first. After all, hysteria was his main opponent. I'll do just this. After he came out of seclusion, Hunyo immediately came over. She clearly remembered what Ling Han had said before, even though tens of billions of years had passed. Ling Han set off with Hunyo. Towards these wives of his, he had always felt guilty. He spent most of his time cultivating, and did not properly accompany them. So, it was fine as long as Hunyo was happy. Ling Han found Wally and asked him for guidance, mainly on how to create the war soldiers he needed at the least cost and in the shortest time possible. Wally didn't dislike this. According to him, war soldiers like him were unique, and he wasn't afraid of Ling Han imitating them, nor would the latter be able to. He was really full of confidence. Ling Han merely smiled, and began to seriously discuss this with Wally. It only took half a year for Wally to come up with a plan. Ling Han retrieved the required materials, and he very quickly created his first war soldier. Wally tested and modified it again. As its functions were too simple, it didn't even need to be made into a war soldier. It only needed to be able to scan and distinguish. After 7 rounds of modifications, Wally finally gave Ling Han a device instead of a war soldier. One only had to place it on his head, and it would scan the person, producing a result within 10 breaths. Ling Han took a look. Although this device required divine metal was really not that precious to him right now. He began to work. The women, the large black dog, and the others also helped. They spent tens of thousands of years building about 1 million devices. Ling Han shuttled through the dimensions, and arrived directly at the celestial realm. He decided to start from here. He gathered all the celestial kings here, and gave them over 1,000 devices so that they could inspect all the living beings in this world regardless of their abilities. If there was someone who met the criteria, Ling Han would definitely nurture them well. He would pay them a visit every 100 million years. Then, he went to the foreign realm and gave the same instructions. One dimension after another, he distributed the special devices. It was still being continuously produced in the profound negative realm. Of course, the more of this thing, the better. Only then could he find the people he wanted quickly. After making a whole round, 90 million years had passed. Ling Han returned to the profound negative realm, and did not go out again. Instead, he spent time with the women. Next, he would go to the realm battlefield to take a look. He couldn't possibly not contribute, although what he was doing was to build up his strength and prepare to eliminate hysteria in the future. Millions of years later, one of the women finally became pregnant again. It was Zhu Xiena. Chapter 3043 Suppressing Shatter Mountains. Chapter 3043 Suppressing Shatter Mountains. 3043 Suppressing Shatter Mountains. Although he had already been a father twice, Ling Han was still overjoyed to know that he was going to be a father for the 3rd time. Before the child was even born, Ling Han immediately traveled all over the Genesis world, paving the best path for his own child. Pregnancy was difficult, but giving birth wasn't an easy task, either. It might take hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of years. After Ling Han prepared the natural treasures, he first headed to the realm battlefield. Even if Zhu Xiena was far inferior to the Empress, because Ling Han was too powerful, this child would definitely not be born quickly. Ling Han directly ran to the place of enlightenment of Shatter Mountains. If there was good news, he naturally had to share it with his old rival. To his surprise, Shatter Mountains' place of enlightenment had really reopened and accepted countless disciples. Why was this old bastard so shameless? Ling Han landed, and directly knocked down the plaque on the doors of the place of enlightenment with a palm. Then, he raised his voice, and said, "Old thief Shatter Mountains, your grandfather is here again." Pu. Those who were cultivating in the place of enlightenment spluttered in unison, and their eyes widened in disbelief. What was going on? There was actually someone who dared to call Heavenly Venerate Shatter Mountains an old thief and call himself Grandpa? How bold was he? Anyone who heard him would shiver. Who are you? How dare you come to our place of enlightenment to cause trouble? Someone jumped out. At this time, he naturally had to perform well. Perhaps Heavenly Venerate Shattered Mountain would view him in a different light and take him in as a personal disciple. Linghan ignored him. He naturally wouldn't take such a small fry seriously. He only needed to wait for a moment. He believed that Shatter Mountains would appear soon. I'm asking you a question, the Celestial King from before shouted loudly. Hong, his voice turned into a huge sword that slashed towards Linghan. Calm down, Linghan said softly, and the huge sword shattered with a loud bang. Meanwhile, that Celestial King also flopped down onto the ground with cold sweat rolling down his forehead, unable to move at all. Instantly, no one dared to move anymore. Even a fool knew that Linghan's strength was unfathomable, and he was not someone a Celestial King could match at all, because that Celestial King was at ninth heaven. In just a short while, the sky was filled with a dazzling red glow, and a terrifying aura that made one's heart tremble assaulted them. Brat! Heavenly Venerate Shatter Mountains appeared. He was clearly much stronger, and he exuded a suffocating feeling that even heaven and earth could not contain. Linghan's eyes narrowed. It seemed that he wasn't the only one who had improved. Shatter Mountains had progressed as well. This was very natural. After so many years, Shatter Mountains had probably pushed all the dimensions in his body to the high-tier high-level dimension level. Thus, his strength had naturally increased by another level. You've come to court death. Heavenly Venerate Shatter Mountains said with a cold smile. Stimulating his supreme power, he charged towards Linghan. Linghan smiled faintly, and tore open the void to enter into the void. He did not want to start a fight in the profound negative realm. Heavenly Venerate Shatter Mountains did not hesitate at all, and immediately followed him in. He swung his fist at Linghan, and the force of his fist blasted out, transforming into a huge skull that seemed to want to swallow Linghan whole. Linghan stopped and turned around to face the attack. Peng! 1, 2, 3, 4. He actually released 13 dimensions, and all of them were high-tier high-level dimensions. As expected, Heavenly Venerate Shatter Mountains had obtained more than 6 dimensions from Feng Wuding. It was just that he hadn't nurtured them to the point where they could have become his battle prowess, so even if he had used them in the past, it would have been useless. 13 high-tier high-level dimensions were equivalent to at least 136th tiers working together to help him. This was no joke. Linghan also unleashed the powers of dimension in his body to face this attack head-on. Boom! The void trembled, and the energy storm was swept away and exploded. It was an extremely spectacular sight. It had to be said that the power of dimension of a high-tier high-level dimension was extremely terrifying. Approximately 106th tiers would be comparable to a 7th tier in terms of power. In other words, the power of Heavenly Venerate Shatter Mountains was at least double that during his previous battle with Linghan. But how many times had Linghan's strength increased? Although he had just advanced to the 6th tier, and his hundreds of thousands of dimensions were still low-tier high-level dimensions, his own strength had increased tenfold. Peng! 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 There was no need for him to use 6th-grade seals, and Linghan already had the absolute upper hand, forcing Shatter Mountains to retreat repeatedly. What? Heavenly Venerate Shatter Mountains faced the sky and roared, appearing to be incomparably furious, and even more disbelieving. After reaching the peak stage of the 7th tier, his strength could no longer improve. Thus, the fact that he could still increase his power by more than a fold was incomparably astonishing. But even so, he actually still couldn't defeat Linghan, a 6th tier. How could he not be depressed by this? All kinds of Heavenly Venerate techniques were channeled one by one. Shatter Mountains had lived countless epochs longer than Linghan, and had mastered countless wondrous techniques. However, the difference in power was too great, so it was useless no matter how many techniques he mastered. This was because techniques were only methods to use one's power. If the difference in power was too great, everything would be useless. In merely a few hours, Shatter Mountains was forcefully suppressed by Ling Han. Let's go. Ling Han grabbed Shatter Mountains and headed towards the realm battlefield. This trip took more than 2 hours. Ling Han naturally couldn't channel the heavenly venerable seals constantly. In any case, if Shatter Mountains didn't channel the heavenly venerable seals, Ling Han wouldn't use them, either. If the other party used them, he would use them. This way, his power would always let him suppress Shatter Mountains. He originally wanted to visit Chong Yang and the other 3 old thieves, but he realized that his current strength could only suppress a single 7th tier, so he shouldn't be too greedy. He had the time, so there was no hurry. Brat, quickly let go of me. Heavenly Venerate Shatter Mountain's face turned livid. If his current appearance was seen by others, how could he endure it? Ling Han naturally ignored him. Several days later, he arrived at the realm battlefield. During this period of time, he naturally fought with Heavenly Venerate Shatter Mountains a few more times, but Shatter Mountains was mercilessly suppressed by him each time, unable to shake him off at all. Get inside. Ling Han threw Shatter Mountains, and Shatter Mountains was thrown into the passageway leading into the main battlefield. Brat. Heavenly Venerate Shatter Mountains charged over, his hair flying in anger. Go to where you belong, Ling Han said calmly. With a single punch, he sent Shatter Mountains flying back. He stood at the passageway leading into the main battlefield, like an insurmountable mountain. He didn't believe that Ling Han would continue to guard this place forever. Chapter 3044 Obtaining the Secret Code of Life Again. Chapter 3044 Obtaining the Secret Code of Life Again. 3044 Obtaining the Secret Code of Life Again. Under Ling Han's coercion, Shatter Mountains was forced to enter the main battlefield to face Hysteria. Ling Han did not care whether Shatter Mountains would go all out to deal with Hysteria, or whether it would just be perfunctory effort. He only wanted Shatter Mountains to enter the main battlefield, even if it was just for show. This was because the more Shatter Mountains did not want to face Hysteria, the more Ling Han wanted to do the opposite of what the former wanted. He guarded the passageway in case Shatter Mountains had any thoughts of getting lucky and turned back. After guarding for a year, Ling Han finally returned. When Shatter Mountains appeared, it naturally surprised Lin Luo and the others. What was going on? Why was Shatter Mountains back? Shatter Mountains, why did you come back? Did you come to watch the excitement? Heavenly Venerate 10,000 Shadows couldn't help but complain. He only felt that he had been wronged. He had just advanced to the 7th tier, and hadn't even shown off enough, yet he was repeatedly frightened by Ling Han. Now that he had encountered the matter of the 5 ultimate elites withdrawing from the realm battlefield, he also wanted to quit. Shatter Mountain's expression darkened. Of course, he was too embarrassed to say that he had been forced into this place by Ling Han. At this moment, he was actually a little grateful. If he had been fighting with Ling Han all the way here, he would naturally have lost even more face. Since you're here, let's deal with Hysteria together. Lin Luo waved his hand. He was looking at the big picture, and did not want everyone to discriminate against Shatter Mountains and make him leave again. When dealing with Hysteria, the more people there were, the better. Shatter Mountains joined the battle. It seemed like he would have to stay here for a while. He couldn't just watch. Die. He vented his anger on Hysteria and began a fierce battle. Ling Han returned and quietly waited for the birth of his 3rd child. He waited and waited, but his 3rd child was successfully born only 10,000 years later. It was a boy. Ling Han was overjoyed. Moreover, this was his child, and no one could deprive him of the right to name his child. He had been thinking about it all these years, so he had naturally thought of a name. Ling Kang. It was very simple because he wanted his son to grow up healthy and well, living every day peacefully. Ling Han didn't ask for much. It was just that simple. Of course, Ling Han still prepared a large amount of cultivation resources for Ling Kang, guaranteeing his son the best conditions for growth. Of course, this was a joyous occasion. Ling Han invited his friends and family, and held a small-scale banquet. The little fellow's rate of growth followed Ling Shi's slow style. Year after year passed, but he almost didn't grow at all, and the speed at which his intelligence developed was also extremely slow. Every day, He would just smile foolishly, causing Ling Han to constantly sigh at the fact that he had gotten a silly son. In the end, he was beaten up by Yu Hongchang, who said that it had been the same for him when he had been small. Ling Han was speechless. In this world, if there was anyone who could make Ling Han unable to retaliate, it would definitely be his mother. Several million years passed again, and Ling Han decided to take a look at the celestial realm. 100 million years had passed. He had to go and take a look at the situation. Furthermore, he had created many new devices over the years. He also had to send them to various dimensions to further increase the speed of his search. This time, he brought the women along as if they were going on vacation. After traveling through several dimensions, they arrived at the celestial realm. The result made Ling Han very disappointed. After so many years of hard work, the celestial kings had only searched about 1% of the living beings. They were still far from the entire number. Furthermore, how many new lives had been born after 100 million years? There was simply no end to this. Ling Han distributed many more scanning devices. This was a long-term plan to land a big catch. He believed that there would definitely be some gains. He then went to the foreign realm and visited the dimensions one by one to see if there were any results while distributing more testing devices. One had to have a long-term vision. After arriving at a medium-level dimension, Ling Han finally received good news. Such a person had finally been discovered. This made Ling Han overjoyed, and he hurriedly went to take a look. This was a young man, and his natural talent in cultivation was very high. At present, he was under the tutelage of an 8th heaven celestial king. He had already reached the peak stage of the ascending origin tier, and was about to advance to the celestial king tier. When they had first discovered him, he had been just a little kid in his teens, and he had been able to reach the peak stage of the ascending origin tier in 100 million years. This cultivation speed was not low at all. This young man's name was Ba Tai. Ling Han taught him what to do, and the two of them extended their divine senses, entering into each other's minds to touch that speck of light. Ling Han had already obtained the life code in his ball of light. There was no need for him to comprehend anymore. Instead, it was up to Ba Tai. A few days later, although Ba Tai did not unlock the secret of his own sphere of light, he gave all the information he had obtained to Ling Han. Ling Han nodded, and gave Ba Tai a large amount of cultivation resources. This brat might enjoy endless development in the future, so it was better to nurture him. He began to enter seclusion to digest the information he had obtained. Very slowly, it took Ling Han several million years before he was able to analyze the profound secrets contained within. He revealed a satisfied smile and filled in a few more holes in the secret code of life. Boom! In his body, every dimension was undergoing drastic changes. Previously, there was only grass that was less than an inch tall, but now it was growing sturdily, reaching a foot in length. Furthermore, they were no longer pure green in color. Instead, there were green, blue, purple, and red. They were all colorful, showing a variety of hues. Although there were still only plants, Ling Han's dimensions had made great progress in their level of existence. Every dimension was exuding vigorous life energy that was nourishing the said dimension. This speed was comparable to Ling Han's full efforts at cultivation. If he obtained a few more secret codes of life, wouldn't his cultivation speed be able to soar? Ling Han's biggest headache was the dimensions in his body. Although they gave him powerful battle prowess, they also hindered his advancement. However, if this problem could be solved now, then it would be perfect. Most importantly, these dimensions were growing on their own. He didn't need to spend any effort at all. Great! Ling Han did not take Ba Tai as his disciple, but still brought him to the profound negative realm. In this place, Ba Tai had even more room for growth. He continued to travel through the various dimensions. After having gained once, his confidence soared, and he naturally became even more proactive. Heaven had truly blessed him. In the next few million years, he met two more prodigies like this. One was called Ma Chunggao, and the other was Anfeiyue. At first glance, there was nothing special about them, but one had a particularly powerful divine sense, and the other had outstanding talent in formations. Ling Han went into seclusion for a long time, and once again digested these two secret codes of life. Of course, Ma Chunggao and Anfeiyue were also brought to the profound negative realm by him. No matter what, they were still worth nurturing. After Ling Han digested these two secret codes of life, the dimensions in his body underwent another drastic change. These were two abnormally rapid evolutions, causing birds and beasts to appear in every dimension. From plants to animals, this was naturally an incomparably drastic evolution with huge changes. Chapter 3045, 3045 Confidence. Chapter 3045, 3045 Confidence. 3045 Confidence. Right now, the dimensions within Ling Han's body were filled with vitality as more and more life forms emerged, despite them being only the most ordinary beasts and birds. Not to mention entering the era of cultivation, even intelligent life forms had yet to appear. Ling Han was unable to guide the process. Although they were his, the dimensions were self-contained. He could only choose to use the power of dimension to nurture the growth of the dimensions. He estimated that the dimensional growth rate was at least 100 times faster than his own cultivation speed. This was extremely terrifying. Originally, he had wanted all the dimensions to advance to high-tier high-level dimensions, which would require hundreds of epochs. However, a few epochs would be enough now. Of course, the duration of a few epochs was also incomparably excessive to Ling Han. If things were to continue developing according to the current situation, the entire Genesis world would definitely be devoured by hysteria in less than an epoch. However, Ling Han was beginning to have doubts. Previously, he agreed with the world's will's perspective that no matter how much he cultivated, he would never be able to catch up to hysteria. This was because hysteria had never stopped cultivating. It had already devoured 4 transcendent dimensions. What did this mean? Just these 4 dimensions would provide hysteria with powers of 47th tiers at peak stage. Coupled with the fact that hysteria itself had transformed into a dimension, and it had naturally reached transcendent level a long time ago after so many years had passed, it would have the powers of 50 peak stage 7th tiers at the very least. You were improving, but hysteria was also improving, so how could you be able to surpass it? However, as Ling Han grasped more and more secret codes of life, he became more and more convinced that he had an extremely high chance of surpassing hysteria. Once he completely grasped all the secret codes of life, he would become a Genesis world himself. Moreover, he would have more transcendent dimensions than the current Genesis world. Where did such confidence come from? Void. The development of dimensions would require a source of power, right? However, this source was not the current Genesis world, but the void. The void was infinitely large, so much so that it could even accommodate the Genesis world of the last era and have a lot of room left. But, what was there in the void? Fundamental power. With it as support, if Ling Han were to compete with hysteria, it wouldn't be about who started first, but about the rate of absorption of this kind of energy. Of course, if one started quickly, they would definitely have an advantage, just like hysteria. Now, it was truly the #1 elite in the world. With its strength alone, it could suppress more than 10 ultimate 7th-tier elites and simultaneously contend against a transcendent dimension while completely having the upper hand. I can definitely catch up. Ling Han clenched his fists. What he needed the most now was more secret codes of life, and this required him to find more people having a sphere of light in their minds. This couldn't be rushed. They could only wait for the good news. Ling Han continued to cultivate in seclusion, deducing the heavenly venerable seals. This was equally important as it could allow him to possess even greater battle prowess in a situation where the original power of his opponent was the same as his. Every time he deduced a heavenly venerable seal, Ling Han would stop and spend some time with his family. Furthermore, there was also Ling Kang's growth, so he had to accompany him properly. With regards to his first 2 children, he had actually missed a lot. Unfortunately, when children grew up, many things weren't up to the parents. Ling Kang soon left home and traveled everywhere. Ling Han didn't stop him, but condensed a doppelganger to accompany him instead. If his son really encountered an irresolvable crisis, he would naturally make a move. Although it was only a doppelganger, it had the strength of a 6th tier. Would it be unable to protect his son? After 900 million years, Ling Han had deduced all the 5th grade seals. If they were channeled together, the increase in power would be as high as 4,000 times. On the other hand, the dimensions in his body were also growing robustly. Although they had not reached the level of a high-tier high-level dimension, they had made some progress compared to a total of 10,000 steps. They had probably taken the first step by now. The entire process would take several epochs. It wouldn't be any faster, unless Ling Han could obtain more secret codes of life. As Ling Han worked even more diligently to produce the testing devices, he also cultivated endlessly. Right now, he didn't need to care about the dimensions within his body. His cultivation speed was extremely astonishing under the boost of several hundred heavenly venerable seals. After staying for a while longer, he could no longer sit still. Let's go and take a look at Shatter Mountains. After hearing his decision, everyone had strange expressions on their faces. Little Han, could it be that you and Shatter Mountains truly love each other? The large black dog stared at him in bewilderment. This is truly an illness, and it needs to be treated quickly. Don't worry, we won't give up on you. Get lost. Ling Han gave him a kick. He wanted to know if Shatter Mountains had managed to escape from the realm battlefield. Furthermore, he had also decided to go to the realm battlefield to have a good fight with Hysteria this time. Let's go, let's go. You must bring us along this time, the large black dog goaded. That's right. We can't miss out on the chance to witness such gay love radiating all over the place. The old ginseng also chimed in. Let's go together. Rabbit also jumped in excitement. Ling Han shook his head and said, all right, all of you can come along. Compared to the last time when he had gone to find Shatter Mountains, his current strength hadn't just increased by more than 10 times. It was probable that even if Chong Yang and the other 5 ultimate elites were to join forces, they still wouldn't be his match. Ling Han brought everyone with him and set off, arriving at the place of enlightenment of Shatter Mountains for the 4th time. Fuck. Even Ling Han was slightly stunned. Just how thick-skinned was this Shatter Mountains to actually build another place of enlightenment? Would the old bastard die if he didn't open a place of enlightenment? Ling Han shook his head and reached the peak of the mountain with a single step. Upon seeing Ling Han, all the celestial kings trembled in fear. They naturally still remembered that Ling Han had barged in and waged war against Shatter Mountains more than 100 million years ago. After that, Shatter Mountains had disappeared for an extremely long time. Although Shatter Mountains had returned later, his expression was extremely unsightly, allowing them to easily guess that he had definitely suffered a huge loss. Now, Ling Han was here again. Old scoundrel Shatter Mountains, your grandfather is here again. Stop hiding, quickly come out and play, the large black dog shouted at the top of his lungs, while physically hiding behind Ling Han. After all, Shatter Mountains was a 7th-tier ultimate elite, so how could he be taken lightly? Hong, driven by the power of a heavenly venerate, this sound reverberated in all directions, with great momentum and rapid speed. A moment later, a cold snort was heard, and a peerless elite walked out. Of course, it was Shatter Mountains. He glanced at the large black dog. Although he didn't use much power, the large black dog couldn't help but shrink back under the powerful pressure. Old bastard, why are you glaring at Grandpa Dog? The large black dog glared back. While trying to appear fierce when he was in fact cowardly at heart, he stuck his head out from behind Ling Han. If you continue glaring, I'll dig out your damn eyes. You're courting death. Shatter Mountains snorted coldly. Was the world in reverse now? Even an anomaly of the 2nd tier dared to roar at him? Boom. Without any hesitation, he launched a palm strike towards the large black dog. Little Han, save me, the large black dog cried out. Of course, Ling Han wouldn't hold back. Not only would the large black dog be in trouble, but the old ginseng, rabbit, rock golem, and the others would also be implicated in this attack. He flicked his finger. Pu, a powerful force shot into the sky, and a hole instantly appeared in the huge palm strike of Shatter Mountains. Chapter 3046, 3046 Suppressing the 5 Ultimate Elites. Chapter 3046, 3046 Suppressing the 5 Ultimate Elites. 3046 suppressing the 5 ultimate elites. Gasp. Shatter Mountains couldn't help but gasp. A 7th tier's physique was indestructible and invincible, so the flick of this finger only smashed the hand formed from the energy that was condensed by Shatter Mountains, and not his physical body. However, it was really too easy for Ling Han. With just a light flick, Ling Han already diffused his attack. Furthermore, although his hand wasn't injured, he felt a slight pain. This was too terrifying. Shatter Mountains looked at Ling Han, and couldn't help but have an illusion of him that had faced extermination all those years ago, and him facing hysteria now. This was because only these 2 existences could cause him pain. Would Ling Han become the second extermination, the second hysteria in the future? He felt an inexplicable chill and a sense of regret. What he regretted was that he didn't kill Ling Han back then, or perhaps there was no need for him to become enemies with Ling Han in the first place. Unfortunately, it was already too late. Old thief, why have you returned? Ling Han asked calmly. Shatter Mountains naturally would not lose his arrogance. He said indifferently, "Do I have to report to you when I do things?" Ling Han chuckled, and said, "I have no choice. I can only send you into the realm battlefield again." Insolence! Shatter Mountains roared, and raging thunder instantly appeared in the sky. He was an ultimate elite of the 7th tier, and heaven and earth paled against his fury. "Old man, I'll completely suppress you today." Ling Han charged over. Although Shatter Mountains was very stubborn, when he saw Ling Han charging over, his first reaction was actually to turn around and run away. Good heavens! Upon seeing this scene, the celestial kings in the place of enlightenment all went numb with shock. They could only find it to be completely unbelievable. Even someone as powerful as Shatter Mountains, an ultimate elite of the 7th tier, actually didn't even dare to take a single blow from Ling Han. Ling Han let out a long howl, and was already chasing after him. As Shatter Mountains was an ultimate elite of the 7th tier, his speed ought to be the highest in the world, which no one could surpass. However, a terrifying thing happened. Ling Han was rapidly closing the distance between him and Shatter Mountains. Shatter Mountains didn't need to turn around to sense Ling Han coming nearer to him, and he couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. How much time had passed, and Ling Han was already going to completely crush him? He hurried on with all his might, wanting to join forces and combine the power of the 5 ultimate elites to resist Ling Han together. Even if the 5 of them were still unable to suppress Ling Han, he believed that if the 5 of them joined forces, they would at least be able to stand against Ling Han. However, Ling Han's speed also decreased, as if the explosive force had passed, and he was already powerless. Even so, he was still slightly faster than Shatter Mountains and was approaching step by step. More than 10 days later, Shatter Mountains arrived at Chong Yang's place of enlightenment. "Chong Yang, quickly come out!" Shatter Mountains' heavenly venerate howled, his voice transforming into a shock wave that could destroy heaven and earth. Peng, peng, peng. The sound wave surged over, obliterating everything in its path. Just as it was about to smash into the place of enlightenment, a large hand shot out with a grabbing motion. Peng. The sound wave was instantly extinguished as it surged past the large hand on both sides. Chong Yang appeared. He stood in the sky, and couldn't help but have his mouth agape when he saw a pitiful Shatter Mountains running toward him. He was too shocked. A dignified 7th tier ultimate elite was actually in such a miserable state. Of course, he wasn't aware that Shatter Mountains had previously been suppressed by Ling Han and thrown into the realm battlefield. Otherwise, he would now understand why Shatter Mountains was in such a miserable state, not even daring to take a single blow from Ling Han. Despite being in a state of shock, Chong Yang still hurriedly made his move. He couldn't just watch his old friend being abused by Ling Han like a dog, right? Seeing that Chong Yang made his move, Shatter Mountain's confidence finally increased greatly. He also turned around and delivered a strike towards Ling Han. Ling Han smiled faintly, and threw a punch. Peng! As he fought 2 ultimate elites alone, tremendous force reverberated, and even the sky was torn apart. The energy of the void turned into a waterfall that fell from an infinite height. Chong Yang and Shatter Mountains were both sent flying. They were no match for Ling Han at all. What? Chongyang's face was filled with disbelief. Previously, the 5 ultimate elites had also joined forces to resist Ling Han, and though they had similarly not been able to gain the upper hand, how could it have been such a one-sided battle? Shatter Mountains wasn't too shocked. After all, he had been ruthlessly trampled on by Ling Han many years ago. However, he hadn't expected that Ling Han would be more than 10 times stronger than back then. Despite having cultivated another 4 dimensions, he was still far inferior to Ling Han. Ling Han charged over. Peng, peng, peng. He pounded on both of them randomly. Even though Shatter Mountains and Chongyang had joined forces, they were still far from being a match for Ling Han. Fortunately, their 7th tier physiques were indestructible, so even after they lost to him, they could still escape, and went on to find another 7th tier to deal with Ling Han together. They found Big Dipper, but even with the 3 ultimate elites working together, they were still easily crushed by Ling Han. Thus, they could only continue on their way to Half Moon. The result was the same. They were no match for him. In the end, the 4 ultimate elites sought out Heavenly Venerate Mysterious Feather. The 5 ultimate elites came together to face Ling Han once again. Last time, they had already been thoroughly beaten up. To 7th tier elites, this was a great humiliation. This time, they were full of confidence. Not only were there more dimensions, but all of them had leveled up to high-tier high-level dimensions. One of them was more than 2 of their previous selves. The 5 of them were roughly comparable to 12 or even 13 peak stage 7th tiers. However, their confidence was actually worse than before because Ling Han had become even stronger. Ling Han cracked a smile and said, "Now that everyone is here, it saves me the trouble of running back and forth a few more times." He attacked forcefully. Boom, his battle prowess skyrocketed. The 5 ultimate elites were all dumbfounded. They had thought that Ling Han was already strong enough, but now they realized that Ling Han had not used his full strength at all. How was this possible? Even an ultimate elite of the 7th tier shouldn't be this powerful, but Ling Han was only in the 6th tier. You deliberately didn't use your full strength just now because you wanted to catch us all in one fell swoop? Chongyang's face was filled with disbelief. When had a 7th tier ultimate elite ever fallen to such a state? That's right, Ling Han said calmly. He began to reel in the net, intending to capture all 5 ultimate elites. Chongyang and the others resisted with all their might, but what was the use? Back in the past, when Ling Han had encountered them, he could only have fled, and had not even dared to take on a single move. Now that Ling Han's strength had instead reached a level where he could crush them, it became the 5 people's turn to be helpless. What made them feel better than Ling Han was that they were 7th tier, and their physiques were indestructible, so they did not have to worry about being killed by Ling Han. Ling Han stacked the 5 ultimate elites together like a pyramid, and used a powerful force to suppress them, causing Chongyang and the others to be unable to move. He sat on the pile of human flesh and crossed his legs, appearing extremely relaxed. If anyone were to witness this scene, their eyes would probably pop out of their sockets. Those were ultimate elites of the 7th tier, and there were 5 of them. How should they be dealt with? Ling Han muttered. Should they be suppressed beneath the lavatory for an epoch, or spend an epoch at the entrance of the lavatory? What difference was there? The 5 ultimate elites were all cursing, but being suppressed by Ling Han, they could only cry out loudly. Ling Han smiled slightly, and said, "Answer a few of my questions. If you satisfy me, I can consider sending you to the realm battlefield instead." The 5 ultimate elites were silent for a moment before asking, "What do you want to know?" Chapter 3047 Getting Information. Chapter 3047 Getting Information. 3047 Getting Information. The world's will of the Genesis world of the last era seems to have communicated with you before, right? Ling Han said. "I want to know, what did it say to you?" The expressions of the 5 ultimate elites changed at the same time. This was their greatest secret. "Humph, don't even think about finding out," Chongyang immediately said. "So what if they would be suppressed beneath the lavatory? Ling Han would have to stand there and constantly instill his power at all times. Otherwise, how could he possibly keep them trapped there? However, in comparison, They were even more unwilling to reveal the secrets in their hearts. Once Ling Han also participated in the competition, would they still be able to obtain that opportunity? Ling Han shifted his butt and sat down more comfortably. There's no point in you guys trying to hide it. After all, I've also come in contact with that world's will. What? The expressions of Chong Yang and the others clearly changed, but it was impossible for an ultimate elite of the 7th tier not to have some shrewdness, so they were all very calm. Ling Han continued to probe. If he wanted someone to reveal their secrets, he would have to reveal some information first. Not only did I come into contact with the world's will, but I also chatted with it for a while. Moreover, it also allowed me to see a scene where many marks of life were planted in your bodies, he said indifferently. He stopped and quietly observed the expressions of Chong Yang and the others. As expected, the expressions of these 5 people changed again. So what? Heavenly Venerate Big Dipper also said indifferently, as if he didn't care at all. Ling Han shook his head and said, "You guys really aren't cooperating, but it doesn't matter, I'm a person who likes guessing the most." He revealed a contemplative look and said, "You guys are already at the peak of the 7th tier, so there shouldn't be many things that could move you. First, an increase in strength. Second, a threat to your life. Theoretically, you can't advance any further. Furthermore, you're immortal and indestructible. Hence, it couldn't be these." However, back then, when Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand was being killed, extermination was also torn into pieces. This proves that even the immortality of an ultimate elite of the 7th tier has a prerequisite. If hysteria really devours the Genesis world, it will be difficult for you all to escape misfortune. However, this raises another question. Since your lives are also in danger, why did you escape from the realm battlefield? This brings us back to the original topic. Perhaps your strength can still increase, allowing you to avoid such a threat. Ling Han's words were slightly ambiguous, but the logic was very clear. Therefore, although there was no substantial information revealed, Chong Yang and the others' expressions continued to change. If this continued, it was very likely that Ling Han would really be able to guess what it was. Ling Han glanced at these 5 people and decided to drop a heavy bomb. World's core. What? All of a sudden, Chong Yang and the others could no longer maintain their composure. They all blurted out, and their expressions were filled with disbelief as they looked at Ling Han. How could Ling Han have known such a secret? Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "How about it? Let's have everyone be transparent and honest so we can have a nice conversation, all right?" Chong Yang and the others were sly old foxes after all, so they quickly calmed down. "Tell me first, how many secrets do you know about the world's core?" Chong Yang asked. Fuck, how could he have known that the world's will had just let the word slip? Ling Han naturally wouldn't admit it, and said, how much do you know? Don't try to get information out of me when you don't know anything. Since that's the case, there's nothing to talk about." How could Chong Yang and the others fall for it? All of them were very tight-lipped. "You're not going to tell me, are you?" Ling Han smiled faintly. "Do you want to be suppressed beneath the lavatory for 10,000 years? Haha, in any case, we're immortal and indestructible, unaffected by all techniques, so where wouldn't we be transcendent?" Heavenly Venerate Big Dipper laughed coldly. Ling Han frowned inwardly. It seemed that he could only humiliate these 5 old bastards now, but it was still a little lacking if he wanted them to truly be afraid. Unless he advanced to the 7th tier, cultivated a transcendent dimension in his body, and possessed the ability to kill 7th tiers, at which point, he believed, one of these 5 people would definitely submit. "Forget it, I can't be bothered to play with you guys anymore." Ling Han shook his head, grabbed the 5 ultimate elites, and flew toward the realm battlefield. This time, he would send the 5 of them to the battlefield together. In just over 10 days, Ling Han arrived at the place. With a wave of his hand, he tossed the 5 ultimate elites into the passageway of the main battlefield. "Do what you should do. If I catch you outside, you'll really have to be prepared to stay beneath the lavatory for 10,000 years, Ling Han said coldly. Chong Yang and the others were all staring at him. Their hearts were boiling with rage, but what could they do? Their ability was lacking. Forget it. The 5 of them turned around, and walked into the depths of the main battlefield. When they came within the sight of Lin Luo and the others, it naturally caused them to be surprised. What was going on? Why were these 5 people here again? Especially Shatter Mountains. Didn't he run away last time? Why did he come back? The 5 ultimate elites were naturally too embarrassed to explain, and they immediately joined the fray to vent their anger on Hysteria. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then walked into the passageway of the secondary battlefield. It had been a long time since he left the realm battlefield. It was time for him to take a look. Moreover, there were some old scores that had yet to be settled. When he arrived at the front line, he happened to encounter an attack from the Hysteria's army. It was a black mass that seemed to be able to topple mountains and overturn seas. On the profound negative realms side, everyone was extremely nervous. Hysteria's army was getting stronger and stronger, while their numbers were decreasing. How could they go on like this? After this battle, how many people would never live to see the next day? Peng! Right at this moment, they saw a beam of light shooting over from afar. It streaked across the top of the city wall, and then disappeared in the midst of Hysteria's army. A scene that made their scalps tingle appeared. As the brilliance of light flashed, the troops of Hysteria's army exploded one after another, turning into a rain of blood. It had to be known that the composition of the Hysteria's army was extremely complicated. From pseudo-heavenly venerable tier to the 6th tier, wherever that brilliance flashed, be it a pseudo-heavenly venerate or a 6th tier, they all turned into a rain of blood. With just one strike, the entire army of Hysteria could be said to have been wiped out. There were only a dozen or so individuals left. Which big shot made such a move? Wasn't that too terrifying? They all looked into the distance, and saw a young man walking over from the sky. His slender body seemed to contain a mighty power that could suppress the universe, making people want to worship him. That's Ling Han. His back. Everyone was both excited and terrified. Back then, Ling Han had wiped out 90% of the Hysteria's army with a single strike. Now that the king had returned, his abilities had risen to a whole new level. With a single strike, he had wiped the enemies out entirely. Having such a helper was naturally exciting, but at the same time, it was also terrifying. He was too powerful. Was there anyone who could keep him in check? However, more people still harbored optimistic thoughts. Previously, Ling Han had been forced to leave by Chong Yang's group of 5, and he was still able to return now. With the presence of such relations, how could he possibly harm others? Chapter 3048, 3048 Putting on an Act. Chapter 3048, 3048 Putting on an Act. 3048 Putting on an Act. Brother Ling, long time no see. Lin Yolian was the first to greet him. Brother Ling. Wu Haoyang also nodded. In the face of Ling Han's invincible battle prowess, he had no choice but to address him as Brother Ling. Big brother. Bai Mifen jumped up, intending to hug Ling Han. Go away, isn't this disgusting? Ling Han hurriedly pushed him away. Xin Chihu, on the other hand, did not speak. He only looked at Ling Han. Ling Han also looked over, and his eyes flashed in anger. Sick tiger, today, we'll settle the score between us. Is there any debt between us? Xin Chihu pretended to be surprised and then nodded. That's true. It's time to return the favor you owe me. Ling Han's gaze turned cold. Was this guy even more shameless than him? Brother Ling, you do have to thank Brother Xin, Lin Yolian said. What did this mean? Ling Han looked towards Lin Yolian. When it came to the Lin clan, he had always harbored an extremely favorable impression and gratitude. If not for the Lin clan repeatedly helping him back then, perhaps he would not have been able to live to this day. At the very least, it would have been impossible for him to possess battle prowess that surpassed the peak stage of the 7th tier so quickly. Therefore, he was willing to listen to Lin Yolian. I only found out not too long ago. Lin Yolian smiled apologetically at Ling Han, and said, the reason why Brother Xin has been targeting Brother Ling was actually because of my father and the other Ultimate Elite's arrangements. Why? Ling Han asked in a low voice. Because for a prodigy like Brother Ling, only by giving you enough pressure would you be able to work hard and maintain motivation at all times, Lin Yulian said. Ling Han was astounded. Was that really the case? Brother Ling, think about it carefully. Although Brother Xin has repeatedly pressured you, has there ever been a time when you fell into a desperate situation? Lin Yulian continued. Ling Han thought to himself. In terms of Xin Qihu's oppression of him, it was naturally the time when, at the beginning, he had been asked to carry out the raids behind enemy lines. However, because he had mastered the ability to travel between dimensions, this mission was obviously a close call. It was only because he had Hysteria's subordinates spying on him that he was almost killed by Hysteria. You have to know that when Chong Yang and the others ruled that you were a traitor, Lord Xin Fu voted against it, Lin Yulian said as she continued to clear Xin Qihu's name. Indeed, Xin Qihu's actions were a little contradictory. Previously, when Ling Han and Foam Wuding had been fighting fiercely, he had given up on defense and allowed others to bombard him. Even Xin Qihu had shifted his attack. Otherwise, even if he had killed Ling Han at that time, he could still have said that he had been unable to stop in time. No. Ling Han then looked at Xin Qihu. The first time you fought with me, you were indeed filled with killing intent. That was absolutely not an act. Xin Qihu smiled lightly. At that time, I did want to kill you. It was precisely because of this matter that Lord Lin Luo came to me and asked if I was willing to help carry out this plan. I agreed to it. However, I've also told Lord Lin that if I participated, I wouldn't go easy on you. When it was time to attack, I wouldn't show mercy. Otherwise, what kind of trash would I train? If he couldn't even compare to me, Xin Qihu, what right would he have to save the Genesis world? He crossed his arms, looking very proud. Ling Han didn't say anything else. In truth, he believed it in his heart. This was the only explanation for the Xin clan's incomparably contradictory position. Furthermore, it was indeed because of Xin Qihu that Ling Han had accumulated endless motivation. Otherwise, his cultivation level would not have advanced so quickly. However, Xin Qihu's current appearance was too cocky. I don't believe you, Ling Han said coldly. Boom, he released an endless aura, and even more so a baleful killing intent that was almost tangible, causing pain to spread throughout other people's bodies. One had to know that the people here were all heavenly venerates, and even they felt as if their entire bodies were being sliced by blades. It could be seen just how powerful Ling Han was, and just how intense his killing intent was. Xin Qihu's expression also changed. Although he possessed 7th tier battle prowess, he was not an ultimate elite of 7th tier, and his physique had not reached the level of indestructibility. If Foam Wuding died, so would he. Ling Han, at this point, I have no reason to lie to you, he said loudly. I don't care if you're lying to me or not. Since you've made me unhappy, you'll have to bear the consequences. Ling Han charged out. Peng, his speed was too fast, and the space behind him instantly exploded. He instantly appeared in front of Xin Qihu and punched him. Peng. Xin Qihu was instantly sent flying. So what if he had 7th tier battle prowess? He had yet to reach the peak stage of the 7th tier. Moreover, so what even if he reached the peak stage of the 7th tier? Even someone as powerful as Chong Yang and the others had been single-handedly suppressed by Ling Han. Ling Han chased after him, and his killing intent materialized. He extended his right hand again, and boundless power condensed, turning into a long sword that stabbed toward Xin Qihu. Xin Qihu turned pale with fright. This attack. He could not block it. Despite not being able to, he still had to block it. Otherwise, he would die. He roared and attacked with all his might. He used whatever secret techniques and heavenly venerable seals he had, regardless of the consequences. If he lost his life, everything would be over. Lin Yulian, Wu Haoyang, and Bai Mifen also hurriedly made their moves, attacking Ling Han in an attempt to stop him from killing. Unfortunately, even back when Ling Han was still a 5th tier, he could allow them to bombard him without getting injured, let alone now. Within the same cultivation level, who could be a match against Ling Han? No matter how freakish he was, it was impossible. Peng, peng, peng. The attacks landed on Ling Han's body and bounced back one after another, completely ineffective. Meanwhile, Ling Han merely shook the power of his fist, and Xin Qihu's defense was like ice and snow meeting boiling water, immediately disintegrating. Shua, the sword struck. Shin Chihu couldn't help but close his eyes. In that short instant, countless thoughts surfaced in his mind. In the end, it turned into a bitter smile. Hey, why didn't he feel the pain he had imagined? Shin Chihu couldn't help but open his eyes, only to see Ling Han smiling at him. Meanwhile, the long sword condensed from fundamental power had long since disappeared. Fuck, are you playing the fool with me? Since you've put on an act to trick me, I'll have to trick you once as well. Only then will I be able to call it even, Ling Han said calmly. Shin Chihu couldn't help but feel gloomy. How could Ling Han's acting be so realistic? He really thought that he was going to die just now. Lin Yolian and the other two also heaved a sigh of relief. They were really afraid that Ling Han would kill Shin Chihu. If that happened, who knew how berserk Shin Fu would become? Peng, right at this moment, Ling Han suddenly threw a punch, and it landed on Shin Chihu's nose. Even with Shin Chihu's physique, he still couldn't withstand it, and blood instantly flowed from his nose. He looked at Ling Han in surprise, his face full of innocence. What was going on? Since you admit that you wanted to kill me the first time, how can I vent my anger if I don't beat you up? Ling Han said as he punched out repeatedly. Under the suppression of his strength, Shin Chihu simply had no power to retaliate, and could only get beaten up. Lin Yolian and the other two wanted to dissuade Ling Han, but after thinking about it, they still didn't make a move. In any case, Ling Han wouldn't kill anyone, so let him vent his anger. Chapter 3049, 3049 Entering Hysteria's World. Chapter 3049, 3049 Entering Hysteria's World. 3049 Entering Hysteria's World. Ling Han was dishing out a beatdown. Even though he managed to prove that Shin Chihu had been pretending this whole time, the latter only had himself to blame for harboring thoughts of killing Ling Han to begin with. What was more important was that the guy had a face that just deserved to be beaten up. After venting his frustration, Ling Han finally stopped, smiling with satisfaction. So what if he was a 6th tier? Shin Chihu was still beaten to a bloody pulp. His face was absolutely horrendous. Ling Han. Shin Chihu yelled. Ling Han glared. Say my name one more time, and I will beat you up for another hour. Do you believe me? Shin Chihu had no choice but to fall silent. After all, Ling Han possessed great power now, and could easily torment him. Although his life wasn't being threatened anymore, he still wanted to hold on to his pride. All right, that's enough. Come, let us have a drink. Bai Miffin quickly conciliated both parties. The 5 prodigies had gathered together for drinks and chatted with glee. Naturally, Shin Chihu was unable to enjoy himself as much, constantly touching his cheeks and grimacing in pain. Ling Han, you've finally broken through to the 6th tier. What tremendous battle prowess, Lin Yolian mused. Back then, she had still been able to help Ling Han resolve a big problem, but not even 10 of her would be a match for Ling Han now. Moreover, she possessed the battle prowess of the middle stage of the 7th tier. However, this was her limit as a 6th tier. Unless she was able to break through to the 7th tier, her battle prowess would not increase any further. The higher the cultivation level, the more difficult it was to battle against someone beyond one's level. This was especially true for those in the 6th and 7th tier. How strong are you now exactly? Wu Haoyang asked. Back then, he had had a sense of rivalry with Ling Han, but he knew that Ling Han had far surpassed him now. Ling Han said modestly, just a little stronger than your normal 7th tier. Shin Chihu gritted his teeth in vexation. How could Ling Han be just a little stronger? Shin Chihu was a victim of Ling Han's violence, and had personally experienced the latter's strength. Ling Han was practically a monster. Brother Ling, what do you plan to do next? Lin Yolian asked solemnly. Brother, are you going to guard this position? Bai Miffin was also curious. Ling Han pondered for a bit, and then shook his head. It would be a waste for him to just guard this spot. With him around, the defenses in the area definitely could not be breached. However, the crux of the war was on the main battlefield. If they were to fall on the main battlefield, what use would there be to protect this place? I want to head into Hysteria's depths from here, Ling Han said. What? The 4 prodigies were shocked. This was such a crazy idea. That was Hysteria's territory. Once they entered there, they would no longer be able to extract the powers of dimension, causing their strength to fall. Going there was certain death for anyone other than the immortal 7th tiers. They admitted that Ling Han was very powerful, enough to go toe-to-toe with some of the older generation 7th tiers or even surpass them. However, when it came to fighting against Hysteria, no one believed he could do it. No matter how monstrous he was, he needed to at least reach the 7th tier. That was because Hysteria was also an overwhelmingly powerful monster itself. "Brother Ling, you shouldn't be hasty." Lin Yolian tried to dissuade him. "That's right, brother. You need to think this through," Bai Mifen chimed in. Ling Han smiled. "Don't worry. Hysteria won't kill me that easily." He continued on his path alone, and walked towards the distance. Everyone watched him leave from atop the city walls, feeling both a sense of worry and excitement in their hearts. They were worried because Hysteria was too powerful. It was undoubtedly the strongest existence alive. Meanwhile, Ling Han was not a true 7th tier, and without true immortality, there would always be a sense of fear when facing Hysteria. On the other hand, they were excited because they had always been oppressed by Hysteria, and now was their chance to strike back. Ling Han left as though drifted by the wind, but would he ever return? With great strides, he stepped forward, full of confidence. One step followed another, and despite not looking like he was going very fast, each step he took transcended millions and millions of miles. In less than half a day, he found himself entering a strange and colorful world. This place was covered in darkness. He felt as though he had entered a giant bug's nest. The ground beneath him was uneven with many holes, and so was the case for the ceiling and the walls surrounding him. This place was deathly silent, without any sense of life at all. There were no living creatures or plants. It just seemed like a desolate wasteland. However, Ling Han doubted that was actually the case. If this place was as desolate as it looked, then it could not be called a dimension. After a short journey, he finally noticed a different scenery. There was a plant, or something that looked like a plant. It was over 300 meters tall, and was completely black. It had leaves, but they were in the shape of different weapons, giving the plant a very peculiar look. There were also giant fruits about 3 meters in length and 2 meters in width. They dangled from various branches on the plant. "What is this?" "A celestial fruit." Ling Han approached, channeling his protective technique in the meanwhile. 4 orbs of light surrounded him, forming a barrier in the shape of a tetrahedron, and effectively shielding Ling Han from all manners of attack. He then reached out and pressed on one of the fruits. Bow! The shell of the fruit pulsated slightly. Ling Han was surprised. He couldn't understand what was happening. Using his finger like a knife, he slashed across the fruit, ripping it open instantly. A large amount of fluid oozed out, and then something about 30 centimeters tall suddenly charged out. Ling Han couldn't help raising an eyebrow. This was one of the early forms for Hysteria's monsters. Evidently, the creature was still very young. Its strength had only reached the 3rd heaven of the Celestial King tier, but it was already full of malice, biting at Ling Han ferociously. "Pah!" Ling Han casually stomped it to death. There was no blood rain from the skies. It seemed like the heavens didn't care about this life. That was understandable. This dimension was Hysteria's true body, and these creatures were its soldiers. Why would it mourn if only one of them had died? Ling Han took another look around his surroundings. There were countless plants in the area. Some looked similar to the one before him, while others were like vines. They stretched over the wall, their fruits dangling down from above. There were countless numbers of these fruits before Ling Han's eyes. Was this the place where Hysteria produced its massive army? They were not born out of thin air, but birthed in such a way. Ling Han scoffed and swiped the air with his finger, his powerful sword chi lashing out. "Pah, pah, pah." He cut down a great number of these plants. He also imbued his sword chi with karmic flames, burning all the plants to ashes. The fruits naturally could not escape their fate, either. The sword chi was so powerful that it instantly killed many of the monsters inside the fruits. There were some that managed to escape being cut, but they would soon burn to ashes under the unending flames of tribulation. Kai. A loud screech resounded as monsters started popping out from the holes on the ground and the sky. These were clearly the adult forms of the monsters. They had all reached the heavenly venerable tier and emitted a powerful aura. As it turned out, once they emerged from the fruit, they would bury themselves in holes. As soon as Hysteria gave the command, they would simultaneously move out. Chapter 3050, 3050 Getting Information. Chapter 3050, 3050 Getting Information. 3050 Getting Information. If Hysteria didn't appear, then no matter how many monsters came, it would still be useless. Ling Han attacked to his heart's content. This was not the profound negative realm, and he was not at all worried that the battle would be too intense and destroy the profound negative realm. Hysteria was the one who was going to be destroyed. With Ling Han's current strength, which other monster could withstand his attack? With a single punch, they were all destroyed. He was wreaking havoc. This should be able to have some effect on Hysteria. Even if it was only a negligible effect, it should be able to reduce the pressure on Lin Luo and the others in the main battlefield. Ling Han let out a long howl, and transformed into a long dragon as he charged forward, destroying everything he saw. Up in the sky, he dismantled the walls of the cave, only to discover to his surprise that he had actually entered another cave after blasting the walls to a certain extent. Similarly, the ground beneath his feet was uneven, and there were holes everywhere. It was the same above his head, which was covered with plants with huge fruits hanging from them. It was the same down below. It was as if the entire dimension was Hysteria's military factory. Ling Han attacked to his heart's content. His battle prowess had already far surpassed a normal peak stage 7th tiers, so how terrifying was his destructive power? With a single strike, the heavens and earth would collapse. However, this was both a dimension and Hysteria's body at the same time, and its sturdiness far exceeded that of the profound negative realm and the flaming frost realm of before. Even if Ling Han attacked with all his might, that attack could only destroy a mountain. If they were in the profound negative realm, Ling Han's attack would definitely have a great power capable of destroying hundreds of millions of mountains. The ground here was as tough as devouring metal at the level of great accomplishment. No, it should be said that it was very similar to the materials used to build the city walls of the realm battlefield. Even 6th tier elites would find it very difficult to break through it. Even with Ling Han's battle prowess, the destruction he could cause was still limited. However, Ling Han was extremely satisfied. Because Hysteria had manifested as a dimension, and was already at the 7th tier, this meant that he shouldn't have been able to damage this place at all. But now, he could do it. What did this mean? Hysteria had manifested as a dimension, but a dimension was too big, causing its power to be dispersed, and thus affecting its defense. It couldn't reach the level of indestructibility that a 7th tier ought to attain. Or perhaps Hysteria hadn't completely manifested as a dimension, and its true body or core was still hidden in some corner. Therefore, indestructibility was only applicable to that part. Which one was it? Perhaps both of these two guesses were wrong. Ling Han didn't mind. Since he could damage this place now, what was there to be polite about? Die. He unleashed the power in his body. It was endless, and the 5 fundamental powers could be continuously absorbed. Even if this was Hysteria's territory, and he might be targeted, Ling Han could still communicate with the void, where the fundamental power was even more abundant. The power of dimension in his body was endless, and it was being generated at every moment. If he didn't use it, it would increase the strength of his dimensions, and he similarly wouldn't have to worry about running out of energy. Where was Hysteria? Why hadn't it appeared yet? Was it just going to watch helplessly as its creations were destroyed? Ordinary monsters were fine, but there were also those mother trees that could nurture monsters. His defense was more than 100 times stronger than when he had been at the 5th tier, wasn't it? Otherwise, why would he dare to come to Hysteria's territory alone? Why, do you want to go against me? A voice suddenly sounded in Ling Han's mind, and it was slightly sluggish, as if it had not spoken for too long. Hysteria. Was it finally unable to sit still? Ling Han laughed loudly, and similarly released his divine sense, and said, "You and I are on different sides. Is there a need for other reasons? I single-handedly created you. In the words of humans, you are betraying me." Hysteria's voice sounded again. Linghan sneered, and said, "You're not a human, so cut the crap. Besides, you only chose me, and it is not that you created me. Don't be greedy for credit. Let me ask you, did you choose me because there's a light spot in my mind?" Hysteria's voice did not immediately resound. After a long while, it said, "You can actually discover the secret in your body." Although it did not give a direct answer, this was equivalent to admitting that Hysteria did indeed know that there was that light spot in Linghan's mind. Linghan couldn't help but start thinking. He had been chosen by Hysteria because of the speck of light in his body, but what about the so-called world's will? Was this light spot credited to it, or had it been attracted by it? Linghan did not think too deeply into it. He continued to try to get information out of Hysteria. As an existence that had lived since the Genesis world of the last era, and had always played the role of the greatest villain, Hysteria definitely knew a lot of secrets. "You should know that your clone from the previous generation has appeared again." Boom, boom, boom. Loud sounds could be heard from all directions. Hysteria might be mobilizing troops, but Linghan did not care. He wanted to confirm some of his guesses through Hysteria. "So what? It's just my previous body that I have shed in my last life. In this life, I'm even stronger," Hysteria said in a cold voice. "But don't you want to know who incited the revival of your previous life?" Linghan asked with a smile. Hysteria paused for a moment before asking, "Who is it?" Linghan laughed, and said, "Let's trade. Tell me, what is the world's core?" "World's core?" Hysteria repeated in confusion. "What is this?" Hysteria actually didn't know what the world's core was. That shouldn't be the case. After all, since the dimensional core was the core of a dimension, the world's core should be the core of the Genesis world. The dimensional core allowed 10,000 shadows and golden silk moth to break through to the 7th tier, allowing him to advance to the 5th tier as well, gaining 7th tier battle prowess. In that case, could he come up with this deduction? The world's core granted the possibility for a 7th tier to advance into 8th tier. It was precisely because of this that Chongyang and the others were so concerned. But now, Hysteria actually said that it didn't know what the world's core was. Did it really not know, or was it deliberately hiding the fact that it did? Linghan made a judgment internally, but the information he obtained was really too little. He only knew the phrase world's core, so what could he use as a basis for his judgments? The world's core is such an important thing, and you actually don't know about it. Linghan said deliberately, "Those few old enemies of yours, like Chongyang, Shatter Mountains, and the others are all scheming for this thing." Hysteria hesitated. Although it had taken the form of a dimension, its intelligence was not inferior at all. The sudden withdrawal of Chongyang's group from the realm battlefield didn't make sense to it. There had to be some kind of conspiracy behind it. Thus, upon being mentioned by Linghan, its suspicion instantly intensified. What exactly was this world's core? Chongyang and the others left for this thing? Chapter 3051, 3051 Frog at the Bottom of a Well. Chapter 3051, 3051 Frog at the Bottom of a Well. 3051 Frog at the Bottom of a Well. "Humph, you're messing with my mind." Hysteria was no longer in deep thought. "Once I capture you, I'll be able to obtain all of your secrets." Boom. The cave wall broke open, and an army charged in. "Hysteria, do you think this kind of trash can stop me?" Linghan said with a smile. Although this was an army of 6th tiers, in front of him, what was it worth? "You will find out," Hysteria said calmly. When it came to patience, it was definitely superior to anyone else in the world. It had lived through 2 generations of the Genesis world. Its lifespan was too long. Hysteria's army didn't attack immediately. Those 6th tier elites were actually combining together, 2 of them merging into one, then merging again and again. Their numbers were decreasing, but the aura emitted by each of them was getting stronger and stronger. It looked like they were intending to break through to the 7th tier. Even if it was Hysteria, it had its limitations. It could only create 6th-tier lifeforms, and could not touch the 7th tier. However, it had allowed its subordinates to possess 7th-tier battle prowess through another method. They fused together. Linghan had seen this a long time ago, but this kind of fusion had a fatal weakness, and that was stability. It wouldn't last for long. At most 3 days, and the body would explode due to the terrifying power it contained. Linghan was unafraid. Firstly, his strength far surpassed ordinary 7th tiers. Secondly, this kind of 7th tier that was formed from fusion probably only had 7th tier battle prowess, while the physique was far from reaching the 7th tier. This was nothing to worry about at all. Linghan still stuck with his words. As long as hysteria didn't appear, he wasn't afraid of anyone. Very quickly, 7 fusion monsters were fully formed, emitting the aura of the 7th tier. In addition, there were even more monsters fusing together, wanting to create even more 7th tiers. Linghan stood with his hands behind his back, and said, "Hysteria, let's talk seriously again. Don't you think that being invincible is a very boring thing? You have something to do now, but so what if I really let you devour the Genesis world? How lonely would you be? Foolish ant, you didn't jump out of that well, so how do you know how big the world is?" Hysteria said coldly. What does that mean? Linghan's heart skipped a beat, and he said, "You mean, you jumped out of this well and saw an even more exciting world? Do you think I'll tell you?" Hysteria sneered. "Tell me about it. I think you've been holding it in for so long, so you should really want to share it with someone, right?" Linghan said with a smile. "If you can tell me about it, I can also tell you the secret of the reappearance of your predecessor." "There's no need." Hysteria said coldly. "I'm invincible in the world. No secret can affect me." Damn, it was really not easy to deceive. Linghan sighed, and could only give up on the idea of getting information from Hysteria. With a long howl, he punched out, launching an attack towards Hysteria's army. At this moment, 9 fusion monsters had already formed, which meant that there were 9 beings with 7th tier battle prowess, and they all charged towards Linghan. Boom! A huge battle broke out between the two sides. Linghan was completely unafraid. There was a defensive light shield surrounding him, and if his body wasn't damaged, then power that suppressed the 7th tier erupted when he punched out. Boom! A 7th tier monster's chest was instantly blasted through by him, but a terrifying light burst forth from its chest, forming a huge explosion. The force of the explosion was truly terrifying. Linghan was sent flying by the impact, and he crashed heavily into the wall of the cave, directly shattering it. His figure traveled backward repeatedly, and it was only when he crashed through 3 layers of the cave wall that the force of the impact finally receded. Linghan gritted his teeth, and the defense on his body was actually directly reduced by as much as 33 layers. It had to be known that although this was still the same total of 100 layers, the defense of each layer was 10 times stronger than when he was at the 5th tier, which was equivalent to having 1,000 layers of defense. Now that the 33 layers had been torn open, this meant that if he had still been in the 5th tier, this attack would at least have heavily injured him, and it wouldn't have been strange for him to even have been directly killed. Thank goodness, thank goodness. Linghan nodded in his heart. Fortunately, he hadn't been blinded by his own strength and come here in a moment of hot-headedness when he had only been at the 5th tier. Now, he had nothing to fear from these monsters. With a thought, the defense that had been destroyed was restored to its original state. It was now completely flawless. Die! He charged back, and as he brandished his fists, his terrifying battle prowess seethed. Peng, peng, peng. 3 7th-tier fusion monsters exploded together, turning into an energy storm that made it seem like it was the end of the world, sending Linghan flying again. Impressive. Linghan was flabbergasted. 3 monsters exploding at the same time shaved off as many as 63 layers of his defenses. How could it be so powerful? He reflected on the situation in his mind, and immediately came to a realization. It turned out that there were many explosive monsters among these fusion monsters, and each of them had fused with at least 10 of these monsters. Their power was naturally terrifying. Around him, there were still 6th-tier monsters fusing, but the number of exploding monsters was extremely small. This was very normal. Even if it was Hysteria, it should be extremely difficult to create a monster with 7th tier power. Even if it could unleash a burst of such power only once, it would still break some kind of restriction, so how could it be created on a large scale? However, Ling Han had no intention of continuing the battle. No matter how many of these monsters he eliminated, it would be useless. At most he would be able to temporarily relieve the pressure on the secondary battlefield. It wouldn't be long before the Hysteria army recovered its scale, and the battle would resume. In that case, I'll destroy as much as I can before leaving. Ling Han charged out, trying his best to avoid the 7th tier monsters. If he really couldn't avoid them, he would only clash head-on with them. This way, even if he was affected by the shock waves of the explosion, it wouldn't be able to tear through his defenses. Without a true immortal body, he would certainly have some concerns. Ling Han sighed with emotion. He was clearly much stronger than Chong Yang and the others, but he had to be extremely careful when fighting these monsters, unlike Chong Yang and the others, who didn't have to worry about their own safety at all. Peng, peng, peng. The caves here were destroyed one by one. Ling Han's main focus was to destroy those plants. They seemed to be mother trees which could continuously create monsters. Destroying them should be able to greatly slow down Hysteria's invasion. As expected, after he focused his attacks on the plants, Hysteria was clearly enraged. Previously, it had not made a move to deal with Ling Han. It seemed to have been held back by Lin Luo and the others, or perhaps it was for some other reason. However, now it swung out a tentacle, striking towards Ling Han. Peng! Ling Han didn't cower, and chose to face it head-on. He wanted to know just how terrifying Hysteria's attack was. With a single strike, he was immediately sent flying, crashing through 9 layers of cave wall before coming to a stop. He took a look and couldn't help but be shocked. There were only 9 layers of defense left on his body. If the power of Hysteria advanced a step further, or if its attacks became more concentrated, Ling Han's defense would still become incomparably weak. With a thought, his defenses were immediately replenished, and it instantly turned from dull to dazzling. I'm done playing. Ling Han's figure flashed. With Hysteria attacking, the situation would be completely different. The strongest in the world was still Hysteria, an unshakable existence. Chapter 3052 Escape. Chapter 3052, 3052 Escape. 3052 Escape. Ling Han ran. Hysteria naturally couldn't just stand by and watch as he wreaked havoc. And after wreaking havoc, could he still leave? It immediately whipped out another tentacle. Boom! The tentacle rose into the air with a terrifying might. Ling Han ran as fast as he could. He was not going to fight Hysteria head-on. This was a task with no returns for him, and it would only cause him to fall into a tight encirclement. If he was struck by that 7th tier fusion monster again, it would really be able to severely injure him. Shua! The tentacle brushed past Ling Han's back, and was just a little bit away from hitting his back. You've entered my territory, and you still want to run? Hysteria sneered. Boom! The ground in front of Ling Han immediately arched up, as if it had a life of its own, turning into a wall. This was a dimension, and it was also Hysteria's body. Naturally, it could change its body at will. Boom! Ling Han directly crashed into it, and this wall immediately shattered, but Ling Han's speed was also unavoidably affected. Hysteria's attack had already arrived, and was headed straight for Ling Han. Ling Han turned around to face the attack. Hysteria's attack was too terrifying. Even though his defense was powerful, he still had no choice but to parry it. Even if a single strike could not completely break through his defense, he still had to be on guard. Under the huge impact, Ling Han only felt his arms go numb, and his entire body was sent flying. Boom! 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 The terrain here changed drastically. The ground began to wrinkle, and the path ahead had already disappeared, turning into hard mountain rock. There was no way back now. He would either have to find another path, or he would have to fight his way through. Ling Han decisively chose to advance courageously. Since Hysteria could change his path, it could naturally change any other part. In the first place, this was the inside of its body, and it could change it however it wanted. Boom! 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 Ling Han was like a god of destruction, forcefully opening up a path. However, the ground here was incomparably firm, and could even withstand a 6th tier attack. Although Ling Han's current strength had far surpassed the 6th tier, the ground here was too thick. Ling Han's punch could blast out a huge hole that was over 50 kilometers deep, but what was the overall thickness? This greatly limited Ling Han's speed, and Hysteria's tentacle naturally caught up to him easily. Ling Han turned to face the attack. Peng! The tentacle whipped over, instantly sending him flying. However, relying on the power of Hysteria's attack, Ling Han forcefully shattered a large area behind him. His face was slightly flushed. This attack had almost shattered his defense. Even so, his internal organs had still suffered some impact, making him feel a little uncomfortable. However, there was no time for him to adjust. He immediately restored his defenses and continued to charge forward. Hysteria chased after Ling Han, while Ling Han ran for his life. He felt like he was walking on the edge of life and death again, which allowed him to gain endless enlightenment, as if there were flowers blooming in the void. After escaping this time, he would definitely be able to improve greatly. It had been a long time since he had experienced such a feeling. As his strength reached the peak of the 7th tier, the only thing in the world that could threaten his life was Hysteria. Ling Han continuously endured the bombardment of Hysteria, and blood was already seeping out from the corner of his mouth. On the 2nd day, the skin all over his body had cracked open, and blood gushed out, dyeing his entire body red. The speed of his return was too slow. Originally, it had only taken him half a day to charge his way over, but now it had already been a day, and he was only halfway there. One more day. Ling Han gritted his teeth. This escape was abnormally arduous, but if he couldn't endure it, he would die. Under the threat of death, he unearthed his potential further, and boundless power surged out of his body, supporting him to continuously persevere. Hysteria was also shocked. It would have been fine if Ling Han had been in the 7th tier, but he was clearly only in the 6th tier, and did not have an undying and indestructible physique, so how could he persist for such a long time under its frenzied bombardment? Such a person could not be left alive. Its attacks became more and more violent. Previously, it had only lashed out with one tentacle, but now there were 2 of them. After another half a day, the number had increased to 3. An additional tentacle wasn't just a change in quantity. Indeed, its power had also increased greatly. The 3 tentacles lashed out wildly, and their attacks were as violent as a tidal wave. Boom! There were also spiritual attacks that condensed into heavenly spears that stabbed towards Ling Han, intending to destroy his mind. However, there were millions of dimensions in Ling Han's body, and every dimension had developed life. Even if they were just ordinary birds, beasts, or in fact just plants, they still contained a trace of consciousness. When these consciousnesses were combined, how powerful could they be? Hysteria's spiritual assault came crashing over, but it was caught by these consciousnesses and disintegrated bit by bit. By the time it finally reached Ling Han's mind, it was already spent, and no longer had any destructive power. Even a being as strong as Hysteria had its limits. Ha ha ha, Hysteria, I'll remember this debt for now. It won't be long before I suppress you, Ling Han said as he sped away. There won't be a next time, Hysteria balefully said as it brandished its 4th tentacle. If it couldn't kill Ling Han this time, then there would really be nothing it could do when Ling Han advanced into the 7th tier and attained an undying and indestructible physique. Of course, if it could devour the entire Genesis world, its power would reach a new height, and killing a 7th tier would become possible. Ling Han roared madly, breaking through the siege all the way, as if he had gone mad. Peng! A passageway appeared diagonally in front of them. Even Hysteria couldn't affect the passageway of the 2 realms. Now that he was here, it was finally a smooth path. Ling Han, on the other hand, sneered coldly. He did not head towards that passageway at all, and instead continued to charge forward. I haven't reached the passageway of the 2 realms yet, Ling Han thought to himself. How long had his journey been? He knew very well, and a passageway of the 2 realms had appeared here. It was too early. Therefore, this one had to be fake. If Ling Han really turned into this passage, it would definitely not lead to the profound negative realm, but to the interior of Hysteria's body. Then, he might not be able to walk out of it for the rest of his life. This was a trap that Hysteria had set for him. Since this was the interior of Hysteria, creating such an environment was simply too easy. However, after advancing another 9,000 meters, another passageway appeared in front of Ling Han, and there were two of them. Ling Han hesitated slightly. According to his calculations, the passageway of the two realms should be here, but two had actually appeared. One of them was definitely fake, and it was created by Hysteria. If he walked into it, he might unknowingly be led into the interior of Hysteria. Which one was it? He would know after walking for a while. In any case, a spatial passageway was only so long. After walking for a while, it should be the profound negative realm. If he couldn't reach the other end, he could immediately turn back. He chose the passage on the right side. He leaped into the passageway, and in just 2 or 3 steps, a familiar sky appeared in front of him, and a familiar power assaulted his face. This was the aura that belonged solely to the profound negative realm. Chapter 3053, 3053 Who is attacking? Chapter 3053, 3053 Who is attacking? 3053 Who is attacking? He was out. Ling Han fell out, but his figure did not stop. Even if Hysteria would be suppressed by the heaven and earth of the profound negative realm from here onwards, the battle prowess it could unleash was still terrifying, and he absolutely could not be careless. He sped forward, and further ran for tens of thousands of kilometers before stopping. Once he had reached this place, he was no longer within Hysteria's domain. It would become rather difficult for it to track Ling Han's whereabouts. Ling Han lay on the ground, panting heavily. He had already made a very high estimate of Hysteria, but he had still miscalculated. As expected of the #1 scourge in history. It was truly too powerful. If I want to stand against Hysteria, I must develop the dimensions in my body into high-tier high-level dimensions. Otherwise, my own defense will still be unable to withstand its attack. Ling Han looked at the grey sky. In the realm battlefield, the sky was dark and extremely oppressive. The gains this time are not small. After destroying many mother trees, I can at least reduce the pressure on the secondary battlefield. In the end, Hysteria must have used a lot of strength to chase after me. This will also have a positive effect on the main battlefield. Although I didn't talk much with Hysteria, it revealed some secrets. What exactly is the world's core? Does it even exist? Chong Yang, and his group all know about this thing. It was revealed by the world's will of the Genesis world of the last era, but this guy itself is very suspicious. It kept blabbering, and seemed to have accidentally let this piece of information slip out, which made it seem very genuine, but it has a more confusing effect. If this so-called world's will is lying, there might not be a world's core. If this deduction is true, then what's its purpose in deceiving Chong Yang and me? Also, Hysteria mocked me as a frog at the bottom of a well. What's the truth behind these words? Could it be that the void is so big, and there's a second, third, or even more Genesis worlds? Ling Han was shocked. Could it be that Genesis worlds could also be like dimensions, one after another, without an end? Thinking about it, it made sense. Compared to the void, the Genesis world was indeed pitifully small. It wasn't impossible to say that there were a few or even more Genesis worlds in the void. Things are getting more and more confusing. Just what are Hysteria and the world's will plotting, and what is the role of extermination in this? Ling Han muttered. However, this was clearly not something that he could think of just by clasping his head here. Thus, he quickly got up, and decided not to think about these things for the time being. Strength was the most important thing. As long as one had enough strength, one punch would be enough to settle anything well, at most 2 punches. Ling Han returned to the barrier at the secondary battlefield, and upon seeing his bloody appearance, Lin Yolian and the others were all shocked. Hysteria was indeed Hysteria. Even someone as powerful as Ling Han was in such a sorry state. As expected of its reputation as the #1 monster in the world who wreaked havoc. Meanwhile, Ling Han was also very impressive and awesome. As a 6th tier, he could actually go to the headquarters of Hysteria, charge right in, and come charging back again. This should be something that even 7th tiers could not do. Ling Han briefly explained the situation, but did not reveal the details of his conversation with Hysteria. He did not want Lin Yolian and the others to be overly suspicious for no reason. Their focus should still be on cultivation. When can you guys break through to the 7th tier? He asked. Lin Yolian and the others all shook their heads. Breaking through to the 7th tier was easier said than done. Without the accumulation of a few epochs, it was impossible for them to break through easily. Just take a look. Right until this moment, just how many 7th tiers had been nurtured in this era of the Genesis world? Furthermore, that was still because they had the core of the Flaming Frost Realm, which allowed 10,000 shadows and golden silk moth to take that final step. Otherwise, there would only be 7 ultimate elites. For these 4 people to break through to the 7th tier as soon as possible, they would possibly have to place their hopes on the destruction of the profound negative realm so that another dimensional core could be contributed. Ling Han did not ask further. He left the realm battlefield, and prepared to make another trip to the various dimensions to see if there were any new gains. Once the dimensions in his body matured, he would truly become qualified to stand against Hysteria. Even if he would still be outmatched, he could at least ensure that he would not be killed or wounded. Ling Han first recuperated from his injuries. Fortunately, they didn't hurt his foundation, and he recovered very quickly. He set off and returned to reunite with everyone. Then, he began his interdimensional journey. He passed through one dimension after another, and after arriving at a low-level dimension, Ling Han received a piece of news that made him frown incessantly. A person who met Ling Han's requirements had indeed been discovered here 300,000 years ago, but only 70,000 years had passed, and he had suddenly disappeared. No one knew how he had disappeared, and it was as if he had never existed. Ling Han didn't believe that. This was definitely an elite who had interfered and captured him. However, there was a first-tier heavenly venerate guarding this place. To be able to make him unable to detect anything, the other party's cultivation level had to be at least at the 3rd tier. A 3rd-tier ultimate elite had appeared in a low-level dimension. This was impossible unless the other party came from another dimension. That was worth thinking about, then. Did he pass by here coincidentally and discover that the chosen person had outstanding natural talent in cultivation, so he took him in as a disciple and left silently, or was the other party targeting the light spot in the chosen person's mind? It would be fine if it was the former, but if it was the latter, then it would be a big problem. Ling Han traced back time to 230,000 years ago. He had indeed seen a young man here, but then he suddenly disappeared. Ling Han set the time for the day of the disappearance, and slowly examined this one day. The young man had been cultivating when he suddenly revealed a shocked expression and disappeared. Ling Han seemed to have seen a large hand grab out, but it was too blurry. He wanted to see clearly, but there was nothing he could do. Too much time had passed, and the person who had attacked had been too powerful. He had blinded the heavens, preventing time from leaving a shadow of him. However, even if he only saw a hand, Ling Han was sure that this person's strength was incomparable, and he was at least a 5th-tier heavenly venerate. Ling Han didn't make a big fuss, and arrived at the next dimension. However, the type of person he was looking for wasn't here. After traveling through 937 dimensions, he finally found someone who met the requirements. After Ling Han obtained the information regarding the light spot in that person's mind, a thought occurred to him. He decided not to send this person to the profound negative realm first, but to stay behind and pretend that nothing had happened. Traveling through dimensions was extremely time-consuming. Apart from special people like Ling Han, who wouldn't need hundreds or thousands of years, or in fact even longer. Therefore, if someone was also searching for someone with a speck of light in his mind, that person should be slower than Ling Han, and would come looking. He would wait for him, then. He wanted to snatch that young man back from him. Ling Han sat quietly at the side. He restrained all of his aura. With the height he was currently standing at, no one would be able to discover his existence at all unless Hysteria personally arrived. Another 90,000 years passed, and Ling Han suddenly sensed a powerful aura surging over. Chapter 3054, 3054. So it's you. Chapter 3054, 3054 So it's you. 3054 So it's you. Here he comes. Ling Han's eyes suddenly lit up. He still didn't reveal a trace of his aura, and only sat quietly. A figure quietly appeared. He did not alert anyone, and only a powerful existence like Ling Han could sense his aura. When Ling Han saw this person's appearance, he couldn't help but reveal a look of surprise. In fact, he even had a feeling of disbelief. It wasn't him, but her. Extermination. It was actually Extermination, the destroyer of the previous era, who was snatching people from him. What was the purpose? Ling Han didn't beat around the bush. By now, there was no longer any need for him to do this anymore. He stepped out. Boom. Power that surpassed the peak of 7th tier surged, incomparably terrifying. Extermination was instantly alerted, and looked towards him. A trace of shock flashed across her beautiful face, as if she was also very surprised to see Ling Han here. Don't you think it's too much to take away my people without my permission? Ling Han said calmly. Extermination stood with her hands crossed behind her back, looking coldly at Ling Han, a hint of disdain at the corners of her mouth. This was completely different from the Zhu Hua who had called himself Niu in the past. Ling Han sighed. He still wanted to see the Zhu Hua of the past, but now, this might no longer be possible. Don't go against me, Extermination said with baleful killing intent. Ha! Ling Han laughed loudly. You're clearly the one who's snatching my people, so how did it become me going against you? Who are you now? Zhu Hua, Extermination, or who? You don't need to know this, Extermination said. Now, retreat immediately, or don't blame me for being heartless. Ling Han shook his head, and said, You were also the abductor in the Thousand Leaves realm, right? If you hand the young man over, I'll only beat you up. In your dreams, Extermination said coldly, not taking Ling Han's words to heart at all. Then you're the one who's asking for a beating. Ling Han charged out. Peng. A heavy punch sent Extermination flying, and behind the void split open behind her, and Extermination directly disappeared inside. The destructive power of a 7th tier battle was too great, much too great. This was only a low-level dimension, so how could it possibly withstand such torment? It would definitely be blasted apart. Heh! Extermination looked surprised. Your strength actually increased so quickly. Thus, obediently hand him over. Ling Han rushed over, his fists pounding furiously. No matter how strong you are only in the 6th tier, Extermination said disdainfully. With a wave of her hand, she brought with her an unparalleled power that pressed down on Ling Han. Peng! 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 The two of them fought fiercely, turning the void into a mess. Extermination was the peerless fiend of the previous generation. Back then, she was someone that even 7th tier ultimate elites had to risk destroying the Genesis world to kill. This proved how terrifying she was. However, Extermination was no longer the same as before. Her physical body had been blasted apart, and her divine sense had also left her body. Now, a new consciousness had been born, causing her battle prowess to plummet, and she no longer possessed the terrifying abilities to crush all 7th tiers. She was still very strong. After all, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse, so she was only slightly at a disadvantage when she clashed with Ling Han. However, it was precisely because she was at a disadvantage that Extermination could not accept it. How could a 6th tier be so strong? However, Extermination still had her advantages. Her physique was not bad, and she was completely capable of fighting a battle of attrition with Ling Han. However, this was something that Extermination could not tolerate. Just how powerful had she been in the past? If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have let you live until today, she said hatefully. Back then, she had had the chance to make a move on Ling Han. After all, when she had still been Zhu Hua, Ling Han had almost never been on guard against her. So much nonsense. Ling Han continued to attack. Since Zhu Hua was unwilling to hand over the person he wanted, he could only beat her until she submitted. Chapter 3055, 3055 The Mystery Within the Mystery. Chapter 3055, 3055 The Mystery Within the Mystery. 3055 The mystery within the mystery. Extermination didn't reply, and only increased the intensity of her attacks. At this time, it didn't matter what she said. The more she said, the more mistakes she would make. It was better not to say anything. Then let me analyze it, Ling Han said as they exchanged blows. Right now, the only thing in the world that could threaten him was still hysteria. Even the true body of extermination from the last era would not be able to suppress him. According to the timeline, you first sent the seeds of life to Chongyang and the others, and also disclosed some secrets to them, letting them know of the existence of the world's core. According to the information you revealed, this should allow them to advance to the 8th tier, right? Otherwise, Chongyang and the others wouldn't be so crazy. But from what I found out from Hysteria, it doesn't know about the existence of the world's core. Although we're enemies, I'm more willing to believe Hysteria's words now. So, you must be lying. The question is, why did you lie to Chongyang and the others? What benefits do you gain from it? Ling Han stopped, looked at Extermination with a smile, and said, "Are you willing to answer my questions? You're very smart, and even bolder," Extermination said. "I originally thought that this secret wouldn't be revealed until Chongyang and the others died, but I didn't expect you to be so bold as to verify it with Hysteria. If I had known, I wouldn't have revealed it to you on purpose." Although she had the appearance of a peerless beauty, right now her black hair was dancing wildly, and even her hair was entwined with terrifying power. There was an energy storm forming, and a single strand of hair could really kill a 6th tier. She was incomparably powerful. "Destroy," she cried out softly, and pushed out with her jade-like hands, launching a burst of force that transformed into a mountain pressing down on Ling Han. Ling Han threw a punch. Peng! The mountain immediately crumbled, but he also slid backward, a slight look of surprise on his face. Extermination had channeled some kind of secret technique into this attack, allowing the scattered forces to condense together. As a result, the power of this attack had increased by many times. Fortunately, Ling Han was surrounded by layers of defensive energy. This had only reduced his defenses by 14 layers. Compared to Hysteria, the difference was incomparably obvious. Ling Han continued, "Since you had possessed this body a long time ago, yet intentionally left a portion of your consciousness at the core of the Genesis world of the last era, what is your purpose? Just to say those words to me on purpose? Or, do you want to use the power there to do something to me?" Back then, the power there was extremely strange. It could ignore his defense. Perhaps only the Genesis world could do this. It was also the reason why Extermination had to split away a portion of its consciousness there. Now that I think about it, you probably want to do something to me, and the target should be the light spot in my mind. Is that right? Ling Han looked at Extermination. Extermination attacked a few times before saying coldly, "Not bad, you're very good at guessing." Ling Han shook his head, and said, "It's not that I am good at guessing, but that you exposed yourself." If Extermination hadn't kidnapped the person he had been looking for, then Ling Han definitely wouldn't have thought of this. This was truly a completely unrelated matter, so how could he possibly make the connection? Of course, on the other hand, it was also because Ling Han had unlocked the secret of his body possessing the mark of life. "You've done so much for the sake of advancing to the 8th tier, right?" Ling Han asked again. Extermination didn't say anything. She just sneered and attacked continuously. "You even wanted to trick me into joining forces with you. Do you take me for a sucker as well?" Ling Han asked again. He frowned slightly. At that time, apart from spying on the secret of the light spot in his mind, did Extermination have any other trump cards? Could this kind of backup plan suddenly cause him to lose his battle prowess, or could it be to control him? However, Ling Han immediately shook his head. The power of dimension in his body surged. It surpassed any kind of fundamental power, and he didn't discover anything unusual at all. Extermination's current strength was about the same as his, but it was impossible for him to be unaware of any tricks that Extermination had set up in his body. "Humph, since you've guessed my identity, I can't let you live." Extermination roared, and her black hair danced wildly, transforming into numerous arrows that shot towards Ling Han. Peng, peng, peng. These strands of hair struck Ling Han's body, triggering the explosion of his defenses. Light flashed wildly, and his defenses were quickly destroyed layer by layer. However, with just a thought from Ling Han, new defenses immediately formed. As long as the power directed at him did not reach the level of crushing Ling Han, it would definitely not be able to break through Ling Han's defenses. Ling Han shook his head, and said, "I didn't guess your identity. I merely uncovered your first layer of disguise." He stared at Extermination with a burning gaze. "Who are you? Don't tell me it's some world's will. Whom are you trying to fool?" The other party had intentionally pretended to be angry out of embarrassment in order to cover it up and prevent Ling Han from thinking any further. Extermination sneered. Despite the fierce battle, she was still indescribably beautiful and pleasing to the eye. She didn't reply and continued to attack. Although she believed that Ling Han would never be able to guess her identity, talking to Ling Han did not benefit her in the slightest, so there was naturally no need for her to reply. "If you don't tell me, then I'll beat you up and make you spill all your secret." Ling Han let out a long cry, and brandished his fists of fury. All the 5th grade seals were channeled, and his power surged by 4,000 times. This was truly too terrifying. Even someone as powerful as Extermination could only parry. If she received another punch, she would be sent flying. She was completely outmatched. In this world, only Hysteria could compete with Ling Han. Ling Han chased after her, and a fist smashed into Extermination's face. No matter what kind of peerless beauty you were, as long as you were an enemy, gender didn't matter. Peng, peng, peng. Ling Han repeatedly brandished his fists. He wanted to suppress the other party and force her to reveal her secrets. "Dream on," Extermination said coldly. Her body moved, and her black dress fluttered as she began to break away from the clash. Ling Han naturally wouldn't let her leave easily, and his attacks became even more violent. He was going all out, and his current power could be said to be incomparably violent. With a single strike, a few scraps of clothing flew into the air. Extermination looked at her arm. There was a rip here, revealing her snow-white arm. A hint of embarrassment and anger appeared on her pretty face. Previously, she was still at ease, and could protect the clothes on her body, but now Ling Han's explosive power was too terrifying, and she was unable to protect her clothes. Ling Han was also slightly taken aback, but he immediately regained his fighting spirit. He did not differentiate between men and women as long as they were his enemy. He did not have any evil thoughts in his heart, so what did he have to worry about? Die. He attacked again. Peng, peng, peng. Under his frenzied attacks, Extermination looked even more miserable. However, a 7th tier was a 7th tier, after all, so how could she not have some tricks up her sleeve? When the black dress was close to exposing her body, layers of black mist surged out from her body and enveloped her. It seemed to have turned into clothes or a shield. Ling Han was astounded because he immediately discovered that this black mist was not as simple as it seemed. Instead, it had a powerful deflective effect. When his attacks struck, they would all be deflected to either side of her, making it very difficult for impact to touch her. Chapter 3056, 3056 Another Discovery. Chapter 3056, 3056 Another Discovery. 3056 Another Discovery. For 7th tiers, there was no difference whether the attack they received was strong or weak. In any case, their physiques were indestructible, so who cared? But what Extermination was doing now was breaking away from a fight, so the situation was different. Originally, Ling Han could suppress her with a single strike, but the power was scattered now when he attacked her, and the impact she took was pitifully small. Naturally, it could no longer stop her, and she forcefully charged her way out. Interesting, Ling Han thought to himself. He had set up 100 layers of energy shields on his body, layer by layer, to nullify the attacks he received. Even someone as powerful as Hysteria would not be able to injure him with a single strike. Extermination now used another method to weaken the attack power she would sustain. This was also an excellent defensive method. It can be used as a reference, Ling Han thought to himself. He had never been arrogant and conceited such that he would consider his methods the best. When this battle was over, he would definitely ponder over extermination's defensive method. It was truly worth learning. However, practically no damage would be inflicted on extermination now, so there was naturally no way to stop her. She repeatedly managed to break away from the fight. Ling Han could only leave the void first and send away the person with the ball of light in his mind. This was the target of extermination. If he sent him away, this trip would be considered a complete failure for extermination. She had even been tricked into revealing some information by Ling Han. Although she had not revealed her true identity, she had still exposed the first layer of her disguise. Ling Han! Extermination shouted harshly. She did not have Ling Han's ability to travel through dimensions. Once this person left the dimension, she could no longer track him, and he would completely vanish from her radar. Ling Han dug his ears and said nonchalantly, "There's no need to be so loud. I'm not deaf." Extermination looked at him balefully and shouted, "Hand him over. Heh, don't forget, you were the one who snatched my people first, and now you want me to hand over my own people to you. Who do you think you are?" Ling Han sneered. "Could it be that you think you could make demands just because you were beautiful?" The Empress and Hu Niu were not inferior to her at all, so how could Ling Han be affected by her? "Have you ever thought of the consequences of going against me?" Extermination said. "You can match me, but what about your family? I remember that you have several wives and children." HMPH. She was all alone, and could do whatever she wanted without any scruples. Ling Han frowned, and killing intent instantly erupted from his eyes. Originally, he only wanted to suppress extermination. After all, she was no longer the great demon from back then, and he didn't know who had possessed her. But now, the other party was actually using his own family to threaten him, and this caused Ling Han's killing intent to rise. "When I advance to the 7th tier, you will be the first I kill," he said word by word. Extermination could not help but be taken over by his aura. After being stunned for a moment, she laughed out loud. "I'm indestructible for eternity. Even the impact of the destruction of the Genesis world can't kill me. What makes you think you can? I'll give you 3 days to consider. 3 days later, if the person I want appears here, I'll pretend that nothing happened. Otherwise, don't blame me for starting a massacre." She turned around and tore open a rip in space to leave. Ling Han didn't give chase. Even hysteria couldn't kill a 7th tier, so it was naturally even more impossible for him to do so. Furthermore, extermination was far more powerful than Chongyang and the others, and he couldn't even suppress her. This time, both sides suffered a little. Ling Han hadn't been able to get the target back, and extermination hadn't been able to take her target away, either. "I have to hurry." Ling Han continued to head to the next dimension, and then continuously shuttled back and forth. He wanted to find more people with balls of light in their minds, and completely analyze the secret code of life. However, such people were truly too few and far between. After one round, Ling Han had gained nothing. After returning to the profound negative realm, Ling Han temporarily took a break and spent some time with his family. The threat of extermination was very real. She was alone, and she was immortal. She could do whatever she wanted without any scruples. Thus, Ling Han began to move, and sent his entire family to a low-level dimension to temporarily settle down. Unfortunately, the clan could not produce a second person with 7th tier battle prowess, or else they would be able to share Ling Han's burden. Ling Shi and Fu Tianxing were still stuck at the 4th tier. This leap from the 4th tier to the 5th tier was too difficult. Even Ling Han had relied on a fragment of the dimensional core to breach the gap back then. Now, the only transcendent dimension in the world was the profound negative realm, so how could it be shattered for them? Ning Hai's explosive burst could not be replicated. She was now in the 2nd tier, and it could be said that she was far from the 7th tier. Ling Han did not stop his research on the ball of light in his mind. He only analyzed the life code within it, but there was actually still more information, and there should be more secrets hidden within. Perhaps this was also the reason why he was so impressive and awesome in alchemy. Ning Haishin, on the other hand, had a strong affinity because of this. Since he couldn't find a new secret code of life, he naturally couldn't waste time. After all, There might be a huge treasure hidden there. Ling Han immersed himself in such research day and night. Of course, he did not neglect to cultivate, but once he reached the heavenly venerable tier, it was almost impossible for his cultivation level to advance rapidly. Were there any more items like great herbs or dimensional cores? No. He could only do it step by step. Ling Han had already reached the final step. Thus, wanting to reach the peak stage of the 6th tier was an extremely difficult task, and to get from the peak stage of the 6th tier to the 7th tier was even more difficult. After tens of thousands of years, Ling Han had gained nothing. He thought for a moment, and gathered Ning Haishan, Ba Tai, Ma Chunggao, and company together. Since the resonance between the two of them could unravel the secret of the ball of light, what miracle would happen if more people resonated? There were a total of 8 people. They intertwined their divine senses, and lit up the ball of light in their minds. Hong! Ling Han only felt his body tremble, and an intense pain instantly assaulted him. Ning Haishan and the others covered their heads with their hands, and revealed pained expressions. Ning Haishan was still fine, but Ba Tai, Ma Chunggao, and the others were all bleeding from all 7 orifices. They had almost died. This impact was too violent, and it directly assaulted the mind, as if it wanted to shatter it. Ling Han was also shocked. Then, he thought back, and couldn't help but reveal a look of joy. When the 8 lights resonated, he seemed to see a miniature version of the Genesis world. Within one of the dimensions, there were 8 spots of light shining, and in the dimension 17 levels away, there was a weak spot of light flashing. Was this the 9th person who had a ball of light in his mind? Ling Han immediately moved out and arrived at this medium-level dimension. According to his memories, he narrowed down the scope, and then conscripted many celestial king-tier forces to search for the person. Of course, they were using the testing device that he and Wally had created together to conduct their search. However, even if the range was reduced, this was still a very, very large area. The number of living beings they had to search was in the hundreds of billions. How small was the probability of finding a specific person here, some being who was perhaps not even a human? Ling Han didn't lack patience. He waited and cultivated at the same time. In any case, he wasn't wasting his time. Chapter 3057, 3057 Bounty. Chapter 3057, 3057 Bounty. 3057 Bounty. The Wang clan of Qianshui Town was a very powerful clan in the local area. With a severing mundane ancestor in charge, the only clan that could rival the Wang clan was the Li clan. The two clans competed with each other, but they would also work together to eliminate the forces that might threaten them. For hundreds of millions of years, although the two clans had some conflicts, they were also living in relative harmony. However, on this night, blood flowed like a river in the Wang clan. An old servant knelt down in front of a youth with tears streaming down his face, and said, "Young master, the ancestor, clan leader, and the others have all died in battle. You are the clan's only hope. Please leave quickly." That young man looked to be only 15 or 16 years old. He was very stubborn, and his eyes flashed with light as he said, "There are no cowards in the Wang clan who run away without fighting. I would rather die and be buried together with my great-grandfather and father." "Young master, you can't. You can't," the old servant advised, but the youth was determined, and was not moved at all. "Young master, I'm sorry for offending you." The old servant made a move. "Pa." He delivered a chop with his hand at the young man's neck, causing him to faint. The old servant dug a hole and buried the youth in it. He had just sprinkled leaves on it when his expression changed drastically. "Young master, you are the last seedling of the Wang clan. Please live on." The old servant knelt down and kowtowed a few times. Suddenly, he let out a long howl and used a motion technique, leaving quickly. Shio, shio, shio. Immediately, 5 figures pounced over, close at the heels of the old servant's figure as they chased after him. "Old man, you can't escape. Hand over the remaining members of the Wang clan, and we might spare your life." One fled, while the other 5 pursued, and soon all 6 disappeared without a trace. 3 days later, the ground cracked open, and the young man rushed out. His name was Wang Chuanhe, and he was the only son of the clan leader of the Wang clan in Chenshui town. His eyes were red, as if they could spew fire. Uncle Qi must have lured away the pursuers for my safety, Wang Chuanhe muttered to himself. The pursuers are so powerful. The odds would definitely have been against Uncle Qi. I can't get myself killed as well. The young man calmed down. I am the only one left in the Wang clan. If I die as well, there will never be anyone to avenge the Wang clan. Li Jingchu, you're so cruel. So cruel. Wang Chuanhe gritted his teeth. The destruction of the Wang clan was all because of the Li clan. However, hadn't the Wang and Li clans always been evenly matched, with neither able to do anything to the other? The story started 3 years ago when Wang Chuanhe met Li Jingchu, the granddaughter of the second elder of the Li clan. The young man had his first realization of love, and fell in love with her at first sight. Unexpectedly, the other party also had a favorable impression of him. The two of them kept interacting with each other, and they quietly got together. In the end, the young man mustered up the courage to confess to his family, only to be reprimanded. Although the Wang and Li clans could not be considered as feuding clans, they had always competed with each other, and there had been many nasty incidents. How could there be a marriage alliance? Moreover, it would involve an important figure like the future clan leader. However, Wang Chuanhe had made up his mind. Coincidentally, the Li clan had also sent someone over, and said that they might as well allow this marriage. From then on, the Wang and Li clans would become a family and help each other. In the end, the Wang clan had no choice but to compromise and agree to this marriage. What Wang Chuanhe found most unacceptable and heartbreaking was that it was Li Jingchu who had poisoned the important figures of the clan. When she was paying her respects to the Wang clan, she served tea to them one by one. The poison was contained in the tea. Who would have thought that the new bride would be so ruthless? Such a betrayal naturally made Wang Chuanhe's heart ache. He blamed himself. He felt that it was his fault that the Wang clan was destroyed. That was why he wanted to fight the Li clan to the death in a moment of impulse. However, after calming down, he knew that this was just sending himself to his death. It would only cause the deaths of his parents and family to be even more unjust. I want revenge. But first, I have to get out of here. There's only hope if you're alive. He left Chenshui town and walked forward without any destination in mind. 3 years later, he arrived in a large city. Along the way, he encountered countless dangers. There were ferocious beasts and mountain bandits who had killed countless people, but his luck was incomparably good. He could always find a chance to survive when he was at the end of his rope. His clothes were ragged, and he no longer looked like the young master of the Wang clan. He looked like a beggar. After entering the city, Wang Chuanhe walked in a daze. He longed for revenge, but how could it be easy for him to take revenge? Without the support of the Wang clan, he was only a mere heavenly body tier. How could he advance into the severing mundane tier? It was a long way off. As he walked, he stopped. His heart was filled with dejection. He sat down in a daze. A great elite in this city had created a sun and moon. Soon, the sun set and the moon rose, scattering gentle moonlight. No, I can't continue to be like this. If I lose my will to fight, who can avenge the Wang clan? Wang Chuanhe regained a trace of fighting spirit. He got up, and was about to find a place to rest when he suddenly saw a notice on the opposite wall. It said that as long as they went to Prince Shen's mansion in the city for some kind of test, if they passed, they would be able to obtain a promise from Prince Ma Xian. They could make any request, even if it was to marry Prince Ma Xian's daughter. Who was Prince Ma Xian? He was a celestial king. Wang Chuanhe was stunned, and he couldn't help but have a glimmer of hope. If he could pass this test, then could he ask Prince Ma Xian to exterminate the Li clan? He naturally knew that to be able to make a celestial king offer such conditions, there were probably only a handful of people in the world who could pass this test, and his hope was infinitely close to zero. However, he still had to give it a try. What if? What if? He headed toward Prince Shen's manor in the city, and saw that there was a line at the entrance. More and more people were coming out, shaking their heads and sighing. Sigh, can anyone really pass that test? It is not a test of natural talent in cultivation, and it is not a test on abilities in cultivation, either. How exactly can one pass? It's weird. The people who came out were still complaining, but it didn't affect the enthusiasm of the people lining up outside. If they passed, the rewards would be too great. What kind of test is it? Someone in the line asked. You have to put something on your head. You don't have to do anything. In about 10 breaths, they'll tell you that you haven't passed the test, and that you can leave now, the person who came out said. Upon hearing this, Wang Chuanhe felt a surge of hope, but he also felt that his hopes were extremely faint. His natural talent in cultivation wasn't bad, but it couldn't be considered top-notch, either. At the very least, there were many people superior to him. Therefore, in terms of natural talent in cultivation, it was absolutely impossible for him to pass. Thus, he was a little more confident in himself. However, with so many people unable to pass, he was naturally not confident at all. TSK, what a joke. Even a beggar came to try his luck. Chapter 3058 Disdain. Chapter 3058, 3058 Disdain. 3058 Disdain. Someone in front of Wang Chuanhe turned around and sneered. It was a young man in embroidered clothes. He had just noticed that a little beggar of heavenly body tier had suddenly appeared behind him, and a look of disgust instantly appeared on his face. The test didn't take long, only 10 breaths, but there were so many people lining up. How long would it take until it was his turn? Was he going to endure this little beggar's stench forever? It was disgusting just thinking about it. Little beggar, get lost, the young man in embroidered clothes said disdainfully. He was a severing mundane tier, and he could kill Wang Chuanhe a few hundred times with a single glance. Wang Chuanhe gritted his teeth. If he were still the young master of the Wang clan, he would have immediately slammed the table and stood up when he heard this. But now, he knew what kind of situation he was in. So what if he was still the young master of the Wang clan? His opponent was a severing mundane tier, and the latter could kill him countless times with a single hand. This was the manner of a celestial king, so no matter how arrogant the other party was, he wouldn't dare to make a move. He would endure this. The young man in embroidered clothes pinched his nose with a look of disdain, as if he felt that Wang Chuanhe was still emitting a stench. His eyes were filled with contempt. Little beggar, are you going to scram or not? He said balefully. Even if I don't make a move here, do you think you can pass the test? That's impossible. Then as soon as you step out of this door, I'll let you know regret. Wang Chuanhe's body trembled. He hadn't expected the other party to be so unreasonable. Just because he was lining up behind the other party and his clothes were a little tattered, he was despised to the point that the latter wanted to kill him. His clothes were a little tattered, but there was definitely no stench. He had already cleaned them before coming here. Should he persist? He couldn't die. If he died, the Wang clan would really have no hope at all. However, this might be another opportunity to take revenge on the clan. No, he couldn't retreat. If he retreated, he might also retreat step by step when he encountered all kinds of opportunities in the future. He would never have the chance to take his revenge. If he did not fight, how could he surpass the Li clan and take revenge for the extermination of his family? Ha ha ha. Many people in front laughed. This was naturally to mock the young man in embroidered clothes. He had already said such harsh words, but he still couldn't scare away a little beggar who was only a heavenly body tier. How embarrassing. The young man in embroidered clothes couldn't help but flush. He was truly furious. Good, he balefully said. You actually dare to disobey me, Lei Dong. You're really audacious. Since you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth, this young master will teach you how to behave. Wang Chuanhe gritted his teeth and didn't reply. Lei Dong, you're really getting worse as you live. You can't even handle a little beggar, someone mocked. Lei Dong humphed, and said to that person, Zhao Li, do you want to spar with me? You can't even handle a little beggar. Isn't sparring with you just lowering my status? That person laughed, and continued to mock Lei Dong. Lei Dong's face alternated between red and green. He wished he could kill someone. However, that person was not weaker than him, and the Lei clan was not stronger than the other clan, either. In the face of the other party's ridicule, he would at most retort. Now, he was indeed the one whose weakness had been grasped, and being stepped on. This despicable little beggar. He blamed this on Wang Chuanhe. If it weren't for the fact that this guy didn't know what was good for him, how could Lei Dong have become a laughingstock? Just you wait, I'll definitely let this little beggar know what regret means. His face was dark, and his entire body was emitting a cold aura. Time passed slowly. People left in disappointment, but the length of the line did not decrease. This was because new people kept joining. If they lined up, there was a chance that they could obtain a huge opportunity. Who would not have this bit of patience? Finally, it was Lei Dong's turn. He entered confidently, but after a long time, he came out dejectedly. When he saw Wang Chuanhe, his eyes were filled with killing intent. Of course, he didn't pass the test, and blamed this disappointment on Wang Chuanhe. He felt that it was because of Wang Chuanhe that he didn't succeed. "I'll wait for you outside, little beggar," he said balefully. Before Wang Chuanhe could say anything, he had already strode away. This was the manner of a celestial king, so he didn't dare to be too impudent. He could only shoot his mouth off. Wang Chuanhe watched as the other party left. He gritted his teeth and strode into the hall. "Sit down." There were two people inside, both expressionless. Wang Chuanhe sat down as instructed. Each of them quickly took out something that looked like a headband, and put it on his head. He didn't know what this was, but he understood that this was the so-called test. Titithis. A moment later, he heard an incomparably shocked cry behind him. "Finally found him." The two expressionless people's expressions actually changed, and they both cried out in surprise. Wang Chuanhe was also stunned. Only then did he realize that he had actually passed the test. Hiss. Didn't this mean that he could make any request to a celestial king? He couldn't help but feel his blood rush to his head. He was so excited that his mind went blank. Li Clan, oh Li Clan, you guys never imagined that he would return so quickly to take revenge, right? Li Jingchu, oh Li Jingchu, I want to see what your heart is made of. Wang Chuanhe's mind was in a daze. He had no idea how he was invited into the inner courtyard. Along the way, many people seemed to be looking at him with reverence and envy. However, Prince Ma Xian didn't appear immediately. Instead, he only appeared in the courtyard where Wang Chuanhe was staying 3 days later. "Greetings, my lord." Wang Chuanhe knelt down and bowed. Celestial kings were the greatest in the world. Prince Ma Xian, on the other hand, was incomparably polite. He personally stepped forward and raised his hands, preventing Wang Chuanhe from bowing down. What a joke. This was the person Ling Han was looking for, so how could he dare to put on airs? "Young friend, how have you been these past few days?" he asked with a smile. "Thank you for your concern, Lord Celestial King. I'm living very well." Wang Chuanhe was a little terrified. He was facing a celestial king, yet the latter was still concerned about his daily life. This made him feel touched, terrified, and filled with confidence. Now, there was really hope for revenge for his clan. Prince Ma Xian kept talking, but he was only talking about some unimportant topics. This was because he didn't know why Ling Han was looking for Wang Chuanhe. He only knew that this was very important to Ling Han. That was a heavenly venerate. Wang Chuanhe couldn't help but feel a little anxious when he saw that the other party was only talking about trifling topics. "Didn't you say that as long as the person met the criteria, you would agree to a request? Why didn't you mention that?" However, if the other party did not say anything, he did not dare to take the initiative to mention it. What if he made the other party unhappy? However, his family feud was like a needle that stabbed into his heart, constantly reminding him. Therefore, after enduring for a long time, he finally mentioned this matter. Prince Ma Xian laughed heartily. "Young man, don't be anxious. A mighty figure is about to arrive. You may make your request to him." Chapter 3059 Incomparably Coincidental. Chapter 3059 3059 Incomparably coincidental. 3059 Incomparably coincidental. Are you trying to go back on your word? Wang Chuanhe thought to himself. You're already a celestial king. Who else can be called a mighty figure? He was clearly going back on his word. However, how could he dare to vent his anger on a celestial king? He didn't even need his opponent to make a move. Any random person from this manor could easily kill him. He had been too young and naive, after all. With this thought in mind, his face naturally revealed it. Prince Ma Xian smiled faintly. He naturally knew what Wang Chuanhe was thinking. In fact, he was also very surprised. A powerful heavenly venerate had gone through so much trouble just to find such an extremely ordinary person. He couldn't see what was so outstanding about Wang Chuanhe that he was actually so important to a heavenly venerate. If it weren't for Ling Han, he would have slapped Wang Chuanhe to death long ago if he dared to show such emotions. However, he could only entertain the thought now. He knew how important this matter was to Ling Han. He was just about to speak when he was startled because he suddenly received Ling Han's voice transmission. He hurriedly stood up and said respectfully, "Greetings, my lord." Wang Chuanhe was shocked. There really was someone more impressive and awesome than Prince Ma Xian. He only saw a blur before his eyes, and there was already another person in the courtyard. He was very young. His face was like jade, and his hair was jet black. It wasn't tied up with a crown, and it fluttered slightly, giving him an indescribable elegance. "Greetings, my lord." His mind being alert at the arrival of a surge of good fortune, he knelt down in front of Ling Han. Ling Han stretched out a finger, and lightly pressed it on Wang Chuanhe's forehead. He immediately discovered the existence of a speck of light in Wang Chuanhe's mind. This was a person he was looking for. Hang on. Ling Han was suddenly startled. He had discovered even more things. Their bloodlines resonated. This was actually his descendant. How was that possible? This was only a medium-level dimension. Why would his descendants appear here? No, it was indeed possible. Back then, when the 5 ultimate elites attacked, Ling Shi, Ling Zhenxue, and the others were all captured, and the descendants of the Ling clan scattered in all directions. Although most of them had fled to various corners of the profound negative realm, there was still a possibility that one of them had escaped here. Crossing 17 dimensions was extremely difficult, but it wasn't impossible after so much time had passed. The Ling clan had once been at its peak, and there would always be some precious treasures that could be passed down to allow travel through dimensions. After arriving here, the descendants of the Ling clan had settled down. However, perhaps when they had been traveling through the dimensions, this bloodline of the Ling clan had also suffered heavy injuries, resulting in the death of all the elites, and only severing mundane tears could emerge from this line of his descendants. In fact, not long ago, their entire clan had been annihilated. Intense anger instantly rose in Ling Han's heart, but after thinking about it, he still decided to let Wang Chuanhe deal with it himself. "Thank you for your hard work," he said to Prince Ma Xian. Prince Ma Xian didn't dare to accept the credit at all, and hurriedly said humbly, "It's my duty to do things for you, my lord." It's my duty. In reality, as long as he had a relationship with Ling Han, it would be equivalent to obtaining a talisman that exempted him from death. Which celestial king or even heavenly venerate would dare to attack him? This favor was bigger than the sky. Ling Han nodded, and said, "You go ahead with your business." "Yes, my lord." Prince Ma Xian quickly left obediently. Although he was very curious about why Ling Han wanted to find such an ordinary person, and what secrets he was hiding. However, curiosity killed the cat. He was just a nobody, so how could he dare to interfere with the matters of a heavenly venerate? After Prince Ma Xian left, Ling Han looked at Wang Chuanhe, and asked, "What wish do you have?" "Here it is." Wang Chuanhe immediately became excited, and said, "My lord, I have a deep feud. I would like to ask you to help me eliminate my enemies. There's no need to call me lord. My name is Ling Han, and you can just call me senior." Ling Han thought for a moment, and decided not to reveal the relationship between the two of them for the time being. "Yes, senior," Wang Chuanhe hurriedly replied. Ling glanced at him, and said, I won't make a move. Wang Chuanhe instantly felt as if he had been struck by lightning, and his excited expression instantly froze. His face was filled with disappointment as he looked towards Ling Han, his lips trembling slightly. Why? He wanted to ask, but he couldn't make a sound. Don't you want to personally ask that woman why she betrayed you? Ling Han said with a smile. Wang Chuanhe was shocked. My lord, how did you know? Ling Han had just tapped a finger on his forehead just now, and he had already flipped through all of Wang Chuanhe's memories, so he naturally knew what Wang Chuanhe had encountered. I won't make a move, but I can teach you so you can personally take revenge, Ling Han said. After being stunned for a moment, Wang Chuanhe hurriedly knelt down. Disciple Wang Chuanhe pays his respects to master. Before he could finish his words, he was already lifted up by Ling Han. I won't take in any more disciples. Ling Han shook his head. What a joke. This was his descendant. If he were to take him in as a disciple, wouldn't the hierarchy become a mess? I need something from you, and in return, I'll let you obtain enough strength to take revenge. How about that? Disappointment appeared on Wang Chuanhe's face. How impressive and awesome was an existence that even a celestial king addressed as Lord. Unfortunately, the other party was unwilling to accept him as a disciple. But as long as he could take revenge, this was enough. Deal. He nodded. After you avenge your family, I will take you away from here, Ling Han said. Apart from containing the secret code of life, these people with specks of light in their minds also had their own unique characteristics. If he could unravel them, it would be very useful. Furthermore, this one was his descendant. Ling Han taught Wang Chuanhe how to send out his divine sense to probe, and the two of them resonated, allowing Wang Chuanhe to discover the existence of another ball of light in his body and obtain the information contained within. Wang Chuanhe sent this information back to Ling Han, and Ling Han taught him how to cultivate. What was Ling Han's cultivation level, and how many natural treasures did he possess? Even a stupid pig would be able to become a celestial king if they were buried in endless resources. Just 7 days later, Wang Chuanhe had reached the dividing soul tier. Ling Han had no intention of building a stable foundation for Wang Chuanhe. Wang Chuanhe did not have any outstanding natural talent in cultivation, and was just exceptionally lucky. For example, if Wang Chuanhe had to choose 1 out of 2, 3, or even 1 out of 10,000, he would always be able to find the right one. If Ling Han allowed him to venture into an ancient site, it would probably be as easy as walking on flat ground for him. His specialty was that he was extremely lucky. The dividing soul tier was definitely enough for him to take revenge. Go! Ling Han waved his hand. He wanted to properly digest the secret code of life he had just obtained. Wang Chuanhe kowtowed respectfully to Ling Han. 7 days ago, he would never have imagined that he could undergo such an earth-shattering change in just 7 days. Towards Ling Han, he was filled with gratitude, even if he also knew that what Ling Han had obtained from his mind was definitely extraordinary. To be able to help him avenge his blood feud was an unparalleled kindness. He left Prince Shen's manor, and prepared to leave the city and return to Chenshui town. But just as he reached the city gate, he was stopped by someone. Stop right there, one of the guards shouted. You can't leave. Chapter 3060, 3060 You want to kill me? Chapter 3060, 3060 You want to kill me? 3060 You want to kill me? Wang Chuanhe raised a brow, and revealed a strong confidence. Why? If I told you to stay, just stay. Why are you asking so many questions? The guard said impatiently. Wang Chuanhe thought for a moment, and couldn't help but come to a realization. Is it Lei Yidong? The only person he had offended here was Lei Yidong. There was no need for others to take a little beggar like him to account. Since you know that you've offended young Master Lei, you still want to leave, the guard said, not even looking Wang Chuanhe in the eye. All right, I'll wait for him, Wang Chuanhe said. Since Lei Yidong was asking for a beating, Wang Chuanhe would oblige him. Although the Lei clan still had elites surpassing dividing soul tier, didn't Wang Chuanhe still have Ling Han behind him? Not to mention anything else, Just Prince Ma Xian alone was enough to make the Lei clan not even dare to fart. Not long after, Lei Dong ran over. "Little beggar, you're really good at hiding." Lei Dong was a little surprised. 7 days ago, he had been guarding the entrance of Prince Xian's manor, but after waiting for a long time, he still hadn't seen Wang Chuanhe appear. He felt strange about this, and he couldn't figure it out no matter how hard he tried. Of course, he didn't believe that Wang Chuanhe was the person Prince Xian was looking for. As expected, he had set up many spies in the city, and quickly found this little beggar. "I told you that you would regret it." Lei Dong attacked brazenly and struck out with his palm, intending to kill Wang Chuanhe. A hint of killing intent flashed across Wang Chuanhe's eyes as he also struck out with his palm. Peng! Lei Dong instantly turned into a rain of blood. A severing mundane tear standing against a dividing soul tear would naturally die in one move. Although 7 days had passed in the outside world, Wang Chuanhe had undergone almost 10 years of bitter cultivation under the acceleration of time. As his strength increased, his mentality had also changed. He was decisive and resolute. This was the temperament he had cultivated with Ling Han. Wang Chuanhe did not even give him a second glance. He only said to the guard, "Are you still going to stop me?" The guard's entire body trembled as he hurriedly shook his head. He didn't want to die. "That's good then." Wang Chuanhe turned around and walked out of the city. The guard was still filled with lingering fear. After being in a daze for a while, he finally remembered to report to the Lei clan. An outstanding member of the Lei clan had died, and he was a witness. If he didn't report it, he would definitely be skinned alive by the Lei clan. When the news reached them, the Lei clan was naturally enraged. Lei Qianxing, who was also Lei Dong's father, immediately rushed out, wanting to capture Wang Chuanhe and kill him in front of his son's grave. He was an ascending origin tier, so his speed was extremely fast. With a flash, he had arrived at the city gate. Looking at the bloodstains on the ground, he couldn't help but feel great grief, and tears streamed down his face. He only had one son. "How dare you kill my son? Not only will I cut your corpse into pieces, but I will also find and kill all of your relatives within 9 generations. Lei Qianxing said viciously. Sigh. A sigh suddenly sounded. "Who is it?" Lei Qianxing was shocked. He didn't realize that there was another person nearby. With his ascending origin tier power, most people would have fled far away in fear. How could anyone get so close? Ling Han slowly walked out, and said, "Let the younger generation settle their own matters. Why are you interfering?" He was Wang Chuanhe's ancestor. How could he watch Lei Qianxing hunt down his descendant? Lei Qianxing sized up Ling Han, and couldn't help but frown slightly. He couldn't see through Ling Han's strength, but he was certain that Ling Han definitely wasn't a celestial king. Celestial kings had ribbons of iridescent light twining around their bodies, and this was the most obvious characteristic. Since he wasn't a celestial king, he was at most an ascending origin tier like him. What was there to be afraid of? "Judging from your tone, you seem to be the elder of the murderer who killed my son," he asked. Ling Han nodded. "That's right." "All right, then I'll kill you first." Lei Qianxing's gaze turned cold, and killing intent surged. "Stop." He was just about to move when he suddenly heard a shout, causing him to stop abruptly. A look of surprise appeared on his face, and he blurted out, "Lord Celestial King." There was only one Lord Celestial King here, and that was Prince Ma Xian. The Lei clan was an ascending origin tier force. They were already very powerful, but in front of a Celestial King tier force, they were completely trash. If Prince Ma Xian really wanted to make a move on the Lei clan, he could easily destroy the Lei clan. Therefore, Lei Qianxing immediately became extremely respectful. He cupped his hands and bowed to Prince Ma Xian. "Greetings, Lord Ma." However, what happened next made Lei Qianxing's face turn green. Prince Ma Xian jogged over, and knelt down in front of Ling Han. "This lowly one's rule was not strict enough, and actually caused offense to you, my lord. Please forgive me, my lord." "Holy fuck." Lei Qianxing's face was filled with incredulity. That was a celestial king, the most powerful being in the world, Yet he actually knelt down and addressed this person as a lord, as if he was incomparably humble. If he had heard about this, he would definitely have laughed out loud and dismissed it as ridiculous. He would have treated it as a joke. However, when this scene happened before his eyes, Lei Chenxing only felt a bone-chilling coldness. Even a celestial king had to kneel and pay his respects, so who was this incomparably young man? He couldn't help but feel his legs go weak, and he directly knelt down. He wanted to call out Lord, but he couldn't say anything. It was too terrifying. Ling Han merely smiled faintly, and said, "My lord, please don't interfere in the affairs of the younger generation, all right?" "All right, all right, all right." Lei Chenxing finally found some courage, because judging from Ling Han's words, it seemed like he didn't want to make things difficult for the Lei clan and him anymore. Naturally, he felt as if a huge burden had been lifted from his shoulders. He only felt that his back was covered in cold sweat, and his clothes were drenched. Ling Han nodded, turned around, and left. When Ling Han's figure disappeared, Lei Chenxing's entire body was paralyzed, and he flopped down on the ground. Pa! He was immediately slapped. Prince Ma Xian was glaring at him fiercely, as if he wanted him to swallow him alive. "My lord," Lei Chenxing's heart skipped a beat. "You bastard, I was almost killed by you." Prince Ma Xian flew into a rage, and gave him a good beating. Naturally, Lei Chenxing could only scream in pain. He didn't even dare to defend himself. Fortunately, when Prince Ma Xian saw that Ling Han had spared him, he did not dare to beat Lei Chenxing to death. What if one day Ling Han had a sudden impulse, and said that he wanted to personally deal with Lei Chenxing? Wouldn't Ma Xian be in trouble then? Scram. In the end, Prince Ma Xian kicked Lei Chenxing away. Out of sight, out of mind. It could be said that Lei Chenxing had escaped death twice, and dragged his heavily injured body back to the Lei clan. In his heart, he was still thinking about how lucky he was to be able to survive being targeted by a celestial king and someone many times stronger than a celestial king. This was really not easy. At the thought of this, he actually felt a little smug. Seventh Elder, what's wrong? Seeing Lei Chenxing return bathed in blood, it was obvious that he was in an extremely miserable state. The members of the Lei clan were all shocked. I'm fine. I'm fine." Lei Chenxing hurriedly waved his hand. He naturally couldn't take the initiative to bring up his scandal. He came up with some story, and then closed the page on this matter. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,